All right, hello out there, and welcome everybody to I think this is episode 13 of the Game Dev Show. I'm here today with Johnny from Turbo Makes Games. We're going to be talking about performance, dots, Unity stuff, answering questions, and just having a lot of fun. So thanks, Johnny, for being here, and thanks everybody for joining us.
Hey everyone, great to be here. Thanks for having me, Jason, and happy to be here on lucky number 13.
Nice. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the number. I'm pretty sure we're on an interesting, weird, creepy prime number here for 13 for dots. So we've talked once before, and for everybody who hasn't seen Johnny's channel, Turbo Makes Games, go check it out. I've linked it in the description. You can just go subscribe and see more later. You can follow up and learn a whole lot more about the stuff we're going to talk about today. But you want to just briefly tell everybody what it is that you're doing on YouTube, what it is you talk about, and the kinds of things that you've been focusing on and finding interesting lately? So with people just get an idea of what we're going to be going into today.
Yeah, definitely. So basically my channel focuses a lot on Unity's data-oriented technology stack, where I go into things like their entity component system. And, is my camera keep freezing? Hold on.
It's freezing a little bit, but it's getting better, it seems. It's like it's freezing and then stopping. I don't know if it's a network issue.
All right. Hopefully that's better.
All right.
And focus.
He's back.
I'm back. All right. Yeah. So on my channel, I talk a lot about Unity's data-oriented technology stack, kind of going into some of the performance stuff on there. I'm really just like interested in this kind of new to Unity technology. And so I'm just kind of having fun experimenting with that and like teaching a lot of the basics to people, getting more people involved with this, and just seeing what cool things they can create with it.
Nice. Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of people don't really talk about the data-oriented tech stack or DOTS or ECS or any of that stuff, mostly because it's one of those things that rapidly changes. I know, like, I did a couple videos about it a year or 2 years ago, and a little bit more. I think it was like 2 years ago I did a couple, and then a year ago I did a little tiny bit more. But it just changed so rapidly that it was kind of hard to follow up. Are you seeing that it's still like that, or do you think it's kind of settled down to a point where it's a lot more approachable and the things you learn are kind of staying valid for quite a while?
So yeah, it's definitely getting better. I know kind of back when I was starting, it was like changing a lot. There were frequent, updates to all the packages and everything like that, the ECS packages and all that. And so one of the like earliest kind of tutorial videos that I did on Unity DOTS and ECS, I basically recreated the Unity's rollerball tutorial using DOTS and ECS. And that video has been like pretty popular for me just because it's like a good kind of entry point for everyone. Like it's like a recognizable tutorial that people want to follow along with. And unfortunately, there have been some like pretty major significant changes since then. And so just like kind of the way that you like create systems is quite different now than how it was back then. Luckily, lately, it seems like it's been pretty stable. The kind of major releases haven't been happening as frequently. And it seems like when there are new releases, there aren't as like critical breaking changes for things that you're interfacing with frequently. Like things still do change, but there are a lot more for kind of like the edge cases, it seems like, rather than the main kind of stuff that you're doing.
All right, so you're not having to go in and like restructure your whole project multiple times like you used to have to. I mean, early on, to be fair, like they said, hey, this is early alpha. This is to experiment, try things out, figure out how you guys want it, what works the best, and it's going to change a lot. So, I mean, it was expected to change a lot. It's not like it was a bad thing or an unexpected thing, but it also just made it difficult to make videos, to be honest, and somewhat difficult to work with because like, if you want to stay up to date, you had this extra task of like keeping that system up to date while you're updating and adding more to your game and stuff. So it was, it's nice to hear that it's stabilized quite a bit. And I assume that the process has gotten quite a bit easier too.
Just like the development process, you mean?
Yeah, just getting in and like say I wanted to get started using dots for a project. I assume that just pulling in whichever part I want is quite a bit easier. It used to be quite a task. I remember initially you had to go download the project file. You had to go download everything from GitHub. I'm sure
Yeah.
now.
So
Well,
it was a lot more difficult back then, and then it became quite a bit easier. Now, unfortunately, it's a little bit more difficult. Basically, the reason is because these are like experimental packages. They're considered that way. They're not like in the package manager by default. Like you can't just go kind of like browse them in the package manager, even if you enable like experimental packages or whatever. Because Unity kind of changed up how they like categorize packages based off of when they're being released and what like cycle of development they're in right now. So basically what you actually have to do is you have to like manually click the add button and then add them by the like get URL is what it's called. And then so you have to like basically type in there or copy paste in the packages that you need. And then that's how you download them.
okay, so it is still, I guess, not super. I mean, it's not like it's unapproachable, but not the easiest thing, right? You still need to know what you're looking for, find the
Yeah.
right thing, and
Yeah.
then
And,
put
and
the
the
link
easiest
into it.
way to do it, I have like a video on my channel basically showing how to like set up a new dots project, but it's pretty easy. The easiest way that I've found is you just add the hybrid render package, which is just com.unity.rendering.hybrid. And it's just something that I've memorized because I type it in so much. But basically that will give you, like, because of how all the dependencies work, that'll give you all the packages that you need. The only other thing that you would have to add in would be like the physics packages, or there's some extra editor tools that you might want to use. So you can add those in separately.
Oh, okay. It's a nice little shortcut.
Yeah.
Make it
Yeah.
easier. That's cool. So I'm just kind of curious. I guess I wanted to let people ask questions and stuff. In fact, it looks
Please.
like people are asking some, but I had a couple that I wanted to ask as well. But I guess first let's just take the one that's in chat. And it was, let me just pop it up here. What are DOTS and ECS? And just real brief overview of like
Yeah.
what
Yeah. I
these
think,
two acronyms mean, what the hell we're talking about, like why it's in the title of the video along with
yeah,
TMG,
exactly.
which is TMG is your channel, your YouTube channel. Turbo
Yep.
makes games. That's down below, but just briefly overview what is DOTS, what's ECS?
Yeah, so like you mentioned, they are acronyms. So they basically, so DOTS, it stands for the Data Oriented Technology Stack. And then that's just kind of like the overarching container for a bunch of like high performance Unity stuff that they're kind of in various phases of development. There are some things that are basically production ready and complete, and there are other things that are experimental and still in the works. One of them being ECS, which is the entity component system. And entities, components, and systems are actually three separate things, and we can maybe go into that a little bit more. But ECS is basically the main way that you write code for Unity's data-oriented technology stack.
Yeah. So they kind of go together, but they're DOTS is kind of slightly more encompassing, right? It encompasses
Yeah, so
ECS, which you said is like
ECS is
not
part of
complete.
DOTS, and then also under DOTS you have like the new Unity physics, Havoc physics. There's some DOTS multiplayer. They have like a animation suite that they're working on, and those basically are all different like little branches of DOTS.
Okay, they're all like kind of different things that you can use with or without ECS, right? Or at least to
I
some
mean,
degree.
ECS is kind of like the core of like how everything's kind of written. I haven't really dabbled too much into like the animation packages and stuff, but I know the new physics packages use ECS.
Okay, I was thinking also of like the job system. But
Right. Yeah.
that's kind of under DOTS as well, right?
Yeah. So the job system is considered under DOTS, and so you can use that just like with standard Unity programming.
Right, and that's for me. That's the thing that I've seen people using the most recently. I think that there are some people I know that are starting to use ECS for some projects. Most
Hmm.
people in the production world, like building out their actual games, were using the job system on top of other stuff, kind of expanding on games that they already had without changing the setup too much. But I know that some are working in ECS to just do some pretty freaking amazing things. I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit more about some of the kinds of things that you like. Why would you want to use this system? Like,
Right.
what are some of the benefits that like? There's this whole system. You got DOTS and ECS, and to be honest, it's very different from regular Unity programming. Right, the way that you set
Yeah.
things up,
Yeah.
very very different. So if you're going the full dive in instead of just pulling in like the job system part for some performance stuff that you can kind of offload. So we can dive into that later. What are some of the other benefits that you get from DOS? Like why would people make this jump? Like what do you think?
Well, so yeah, the main thing that they advertise is it's performance by default. And so maybe I can just kind of explain a little bit more about the entity component system, and then just to kind of give everyone like a base understanding. And then I think it'll make a little bit more sense when we talk about some of the use cases.
I think that'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Just
So
make sure everybody knows like why do I care? Because there's
yeah,
good
yeah, just
reasons
make
to
sure
care
we're all on
about
the
it. It's
same page
important
here.
just to make
Yeah.
sure that everybody knows. Go ahead.
Yeah. So yeah, like I mentioned, the entity component system is three separate things. So you have entities, components, and systems. And so whereas like in object-oriented programming, well, so ECS is data-oriented to programming, which is different than traditional object-oriented programming. So object-oriented programming, everything, it focuses around the object. So if you have like a car object, you'd have a bunch of properties on that, like, acceleration rate, top speed, how many passengers can it have, how many doors does it have, all things like that. And then on that car object, you'd have associated functions with it, go forward, go backward, just anything that like a car kind of would have. Basically, everything is all on that object. Now, in the entity component system, we basically separate out those three things. So an entity, it's basically just kind of like a container. It's like a pointer to different bits of data that are associated with it. So the entity doesn't really contain anything. Basically, just pointers to components. Now, components, they basically hold all the data associated with an entity. So, in the case of a car, there would be like a data component for how many passengers does it have? And you might have another data component for what's the top speed. And the cool thing about these components is you can kind of mix and match them. So if you have like a top speed component that's associated with the car, maybe you also have a top speed component that's associated with like a cheetah or something, right? And then so the third part is the systems. So then the systems basically operate separately, and then you can kind of like filter out by component. So you can say like, everything with these certain components, I want to run this system on them. And then basically, because the components are aligned in memory, basically all next to each other, all the same components are all next to each other in memory, the systems can just like really quickly go through all these components and perform, like read and write operations on them.
Right.
So is that
Yeah,
kind of
and
making sense? Is there?
Yeah, I think that's a good like separation explanation. And the big part of that performance benefit is that last little bit that you mentioned is the alignment of memory. It's having it all in the memory sequentially and being able to access it and iterate through the memory and not have to swap it. That's where they're getting a large, because you can just go through insane amounts of things without the
Yeah.
performance hits that you get from accessing a bunch of different objects, because you're no
Right.
longer accessing a bunch of objects and dereferencing pointers and setting properties on them and stuff. You're literally just setting memory that you can batch in, and it's just dramatically faster. So it's
Right.
I mean, it's orders of magnitude faster the way that
Yeah.
they've got it set up,
Yeah.
and it
And
can be threaded, pushed off to separate threads, and just work relatively easy. So there's definitely huge bonus there. Although there is a big cost, right, of restructuring your code. I mean, if you're already in the mindset of writing your code like that, there's no cost at all. Right? It's
yeah,
just like
yeah, yeah.
just write it like that by default. But I think that as people slowly start to transition, like they're gonna be paying that cost a little bit at a time. Like oh, I'll make a little bit of an ECS project. Oh, start pulling in a little bit of dots here, a little bit there, and then start getting better at it. And then eventually, it may just end up becoming the standard. I'm still curious to see like what ends up happening long term. In 5 years, do we
Yeah,
still code
totally.
in like an ECS dots way, or do we code the exact same way that we do now, and it's just all magically wrapped up under the hood, and like
yeah.
they're like, oh yeah, we just found a way to take all the game objects and turn them into systems. When you compile, and it just magically gets all this speed boost, like. I don't expect that to happen. Don't get me wrong. That's like that's like my ideal, but I definitely don't expect that to happen by any means. People always expect like these great crazy outcomes of stuff, and that stuff's going to change dramatically, and it rarely ends up changing nearly as much as we expect. I remember like 15 years ago hearing people talk about how people wouldn't be coding anymore. No more programmers. I think people have been saying that since like the 90s. That pretty soon they're not even going to need programmers because all the systems are going to be so easy and so automatic. You just tell the computer what to do and it'll do it. Or a couple of my friends are really into like the no code solutions, and they're probably going to end up being right that like a lot of the stuff just goes to these simple like ones where there's no programmer required. But I don't think that it's going to lower the rate of needing new programmers.
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be a need. There's always going to be a need for people who are doing logical problem solving, and that's literally what we're doing as programmers, is just logically solving problems.
Yeah, at least I hope there is. If not, then something's probably gone very wrong.
If there's not, then we have bigger problems to worry about.
You need to talk to these AIs that have taken over or whatever.
Yeah.
Great shit. All right, so let's see. I think there are a bunch of questions here. Maybe just jump into some, unless you wanted to dive into something else. If there's anything else you wanted to just mention on ECS or DOTS.
I think just one thing that kind of popped into my head, just expanding on why the performance of ECS works, is so basically like when all the game data is loaded in memory, and you actually load it into the CPU to do some operations on that. It doesn't just load just the thing that you're working on, but it basically loads like the next things in memory. And so, the CPU is already doing that. And so that's why you get the performance benefits of aligning everything next to each other in memory, because it's already in the CPU cache. And then you get basically what's called a cache hit, is if you're looking for some bit of data that's already in the CPU cache, it's just pretty much immediate. Whereas if you're doing something like object-oriented programming, where things are just kind of sparsely put wherever in memory, then you get what's called a cache miss, where what you're looking for is not already in the CPU cache, and then you have to go out to memory and find that, which takes a little bit longer. So that's kind of like why basically aligning everything next to each other in memory works as well as it does.
Right, and that little bit longer, it's actually quite it's a little bit in real time, but like percentage wise, it's a ton, right?
Yeah, a little bit to a human, but a lot of it to a computer.
Yeah, because it's going like off of the chip, through the buses, through the chip, all the other shit through the memory to get the data back. Yeah, I don't know the actual timings, but I'd imagine 10 to 100, maybe 1,000 times slower than just reading it straight off of the cache in there. I mean, that's what the cache is for, to be extremely fast. It's got to be even faster than that, I would imagine. I don't know. I can't. It's been so long since I looked at CPU specs. I used to work at Intel and like look at this stuff all the time and have a blast like memorizing CPU specs. Now I have a hard time remembering what CPU I have in my computer. I'm like, what processor did I get again? Like I lost it.
Do you know which one you have, by the way? Just curious.
It's a Threadripper. It's the 24 core one. I forget the model number now. Yeah, I can't. Nice. It was before the new version came out, and my old processor. Actually, I think it was actually not the processor though. It was the board blew up. I thought it was the processor, but it was actually the board. And I went to go swap the processor because I was pretty sure it was my board. The processor was the problem. Got the Threadripper one because they didn't have the other ones in stock, and then had to go back and get a board because I didn't realize that my board didn't match. Not paying any attention. I was just like freaking out. I'm like, I got to do a YouTube video today, and my whole computer just blew up. What am I gonna do? I can't turn it on. So it was an interesting mess, and like 2 to 3 days of me driving back and forth, my office all torn apart, and trying to get anything working. Of course, the anything was a really good thing, but it's definitely it was a good investment.
Nice.
It sped things up quite a bit.
Yeah.
Made game development and video development easier.
Yeah, I agree. I just upgraded my computer recently, and it's been amazing for game development and video editing and all that.
Oh yeah, the best thing you can get is the SSDs. So for anybody watching who's
Yep.
doing game development, if you're not
Yep.
using a solid
Absolutely.
state drive, I would recommend make that one of your first upgrades. When you do it though, make sure that you find one that is reliable and stable. Like do research on the reliability and stability of the drive more than even the performance. Because I've had SSDs die. I've had four
Yeah.
SSDs
You don't want to
die.
cheap out on that.
3 of them were OCZ drives that just died all within, like, a month. So, I decided, like, I would never get one of those again, and after that, I started to just stick to very reliable drives, so
Yeah.
Intel and Samsung ones or whatever else is
Yeah.
reliable, just like a
I've got the Sabrent Rocket M.2 drive. That's amazing. It's super fast. I definitely recommend it. And then for my IT job, we supply a lot of the Samsung drives, so I'd recommend those as well.
Yeah, they're great. Whatever you're doing, though, if you're working in games, you're working in Unity and stuff, an SSD will speed this stuff up quite a bit. It'll speed up your workflow and your process just because it's processing so many files and it speeds that stuff up.
Hmm.
All right, let's just jump over to some dots questions though and see
Sweet.
what everybody's got. So I'm curious, what do we got here? How many games? So first, somebody was asking what games are using ECS to their advantage, not necessarily Unity titles, but successful commercial games. And then
Yeah.
the comment right below that was Overwatch. But I mean, I think there are quite a few. You want to just take that one though?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and that kind of brings up the point that while ECS is new to Unity, it's not necessarily a new concept in general. I know it's something that's been around for a while. Um, I can't think. I'm trying to think of like any notable titles off the top of my head. I know um, Mike Acton, who is at Unity now. He was at Insomniac for a while, and he was kind of like a big proponent of ECS, and that's basically why Unity brought him on, is to kind of structure out their whole data-oriented programming stuff. So I'm not sure of any specific titles that Insomniac may have developed using ECS. But I would expect that they would have.
Yeah, I think it wasn't an uncommon way to build games really back in the day, because it was
Right.
you needed it for the performance. Things were a lot more functional, and you had to store stuff in memory like that because the times were not in nanoseconds; they were quite a bit longer. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, people are mentioning a couple different games in the comments as well, and I'm not sure what other ones use ECS, but I would imagine quite a few of them do.
And
Ones that
yeah,
aren't
I do
Unity
know of a
specific.
few Unity ones. So I actually did an interview on my channel a couple weeks ago with the developer of the game called Marble World. And so that's basically like kind of like a big like marble simulation thing. You basically can like go into a room and then you make a whole like marble run track, and then you can just like spawn like thousands and thousands of marbles into the world. And so it uses the new like dots physics and all that to, yeah, there you go. So yeah, I interviewed the developer on the channel, and he was talking about just kind of his experience in general, about developing basically a commercial game with ECS. So it's in early access right now. I think so you can pick it up and test it out. I think he plans on doing a like full launch of it later this year.
Wow, you got workshop support and everything too.
There you go.
Yeah. Oh, this looks cool. A
Yeah,
lot of
yeah,
marbles.
it is a cool concept. I think it's like basically like the perfect way to showcase ECS. And I was talking to him about it. I said, did the idea come before the technology, or did the technology come and then you thought, like what kind of game that I could make with this? And he said, no, I had the idea beforehand, but I literally could not make this idea with traditional Unity programming. And then when like DOTS and ECS came out, then he was actually able to like bring this vision to life. So I thought that was super cool.
That is awesome. I think that's probably why it's got very positive reviews and a lot of them, because it was already an idea and it wasn't just trying to fit something into the tech, which I think a lot of people
Yeah.
do. Like they find some new
Hmm.
tech, and I've done it before. Like you find it
Oh
and you
yeah,
just want to make
absolutely.
something that uses it. They're like, I want to use that. I'm going to make a game that just takes advantage of that. It's not fun. It's not interesting, but
Yeah.
it's cool technically.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really cool. I'm gonna have to check that out, that Marble World, and give it a play.
Yeah.
It's
It's
very
cool.
interesting. It is now in my Steam cart, so I'll be grabbing
Nice.
that later on today.
Yep. And then there's a couple other ones that you'll see like on the Unity forums. I know there's one called Diplomacy is Not an Option. So that one is I don't know if that has a release date set on that one, but I know it's kind of like a real-time strategy type game where there are, like real big armies. Basically, you can have crazy battles with them. And then, yeah.
It sounds. What's it called again? I'm gonna pull it up.
Diplomacy is Not an Option, I believe is what it's called.
Not an option. All right. Diplomacy. Oh, paste that over my shopping cart and show. Check this
There
thing
you
out.
go.
Okay. Nice. The little cartoon dudes. It's like my new favorite style.
Kind of that like low poly.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, so there's you got the big armies. Yeah.
See them stacking up. I'm expecting the excitement to come. Here comes the catapults. All right, there they go. Expecting some mass devastation right here.
Yep.
Oh yeah, this looks fun too.
Yeah. So I mean, it's super cool because everything is like independently simulated in real time. It's not like there's not really any like faking going on where you're just kind of faking the graphics or something like that. Like
where it's like a group and the group all just animates the same.
Yeah. Everything's operating individually. Yeah.
That's cool. That looks neat. Kill the guy because each. So in that case, let's just go over this real quick as an example. So in the case of something like this, like this game, these units, each unit. Let's see if I can find a picture that has some units. Would be like an entity, right? So each one of these
Right.
would have an entity assigned to it, and then they would each have multiple different components, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some of the components be things like maybe health, I don't know, or movement, or some other
or
things that
weapon
interact.
or strength. Yeah, just kind of any like relevant properties that your game might need to keep track of.
Okay, and then what kinds of systems, like just a rough guess, would you have in a game like this to control things?
So yeah, I mean, there'd probably be some like pathfinding type systems for something like this, where you have like kind of a lot of entities going to maybe a few different locations. And I did a couple of videos on my channel about this a little while ago. Is where you'd have like a flow field pathfinding type system, where basically the whole world is just kind of like a grid, and then they're like on each little cell of the grid, there's basically like, arrows pointing to the next best cell. And then, so basically you can just like pathfind from anywhere on the grid to like one location. And then, so you don't actually have to like simulate pathfinding for every entity individually, but basically just every entity looks at where it is on the grid, and then it knows where it needs to go next in order to get to that destination. If that makes sense.
Okay, cool. And yeah, it does. And you've got a video on that too, right?
Yeah.
Everybody can go check it out and kind of get a little bit more detail. It seems interesting. So you run that system, and then that just runs against all entities that have some navigation component on them, or how would you set that up?
You'd probably run that system first to basically, like once you have the target destination, then you'd calculate like basically everywhere on the map where like you would need to go to get to that destination. And then what you'd be running every frame is across, all the entities who are tagged to, move to the destination. They would basically just look at where they are on the grid, and then based off of that, then they would kind of determine where they need to move next.
Okay. That seems interesting. I feel like I need to go watch that video now and check it out. Seems interesting.
Yeah, I tried to. So basically, like I did like kind of a little series. So like the first video in the series was like me just kind of explaining the flow field pathfinding algorithm. And I think that video does like a really good job at explaining that. And then I implemented it in standard Unity programming. And again, I think that's just like a good tutorial overview of how that all works. And then I tried to implement it in ECS, and this was like kind of a while ago, so I wasn't like as quite like experienced and knowledgeable with it yet. So I kind of got it to work, but it was like a little bit hacky in some cases, but it was just kind of like a fun little experiment for me to do. So I wouldn't take the DOTS and ECS stuff quite as like the exact right way to do it, but the first 2 videos in the series are good for sure.
Nice. Yeah, I'm gonna go through and check them out sometime soon because I need to kind of personally. I just want to get a little bit updated on it and see where it's going, what it's looking like, and how it's changing, and see how approachable it is. There was a question up above. I wanted to pull it up, or at least a mention about the job system.
Mm-hmm.
And we had talked a little bit about that. I think I've lost the question now, but I think they were just asking about. Here was a response. I think I may have lost
Can you
it,
not
but
like
anyway,
scroll back
just
on
about
this
like the
chat?
job system and the difference between the job system and how the job system you mentioned before that DOTS had like ECS and ECS was not really completely fully production ready, but there were some other things that were, and the
Right.
job system, from my understanding, is like the one piece that's really like the most advanced or the most stable
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
DOTS, right?
Yeah. So you want me to
And
just kind of go over what the job system is a little bit?
yeah, I think it would be helpful. Just tell everybody like what the job system actually is, and how it's different from ECS. I guess like
Yeah, yeah. So the job system, it's basically just like a way to do multi-threading. And so it manages a lot of the kind of like dirty stuff for you that, the kind of typical problems that you would have with multi-threading. So basically you don't need to worry about like how many CPU cores the target device has on. Basically, the way it works is like you create some type of job for some work that you want to have split across multiple threads. And then you can basically just say, once you have this job, then you would schedule that across some type of worker thread. So if you have like a bunch of these jobs queued up, you kind of have this like list of all these scheduled jobs. And then when any of the CPU cores, what are basically known as like worker threads, they can just basically pull from that list one by one and then just kind of work through the things in parallel with the main thread.
so it kind of runs like it's a little bit like a thread pool, but more like the parallel for loops and stuff in C Sharp. So I don't know if you've used those in regular old C Sharp, but or anybody watching this, I assume at least a couple people in chat have. But you do like parallel dot for and just do a parallel loop, which would spread it across multiple threads, and it's somewhat doing the same thing where you're iterating over a collection of things across threads and keeping it mostly just keeping it off the main thread, but also just being able to scale that up across as many threads or processors as you have, right? Or logical processors as you have. And kind of pump that up and do a bit
Yeah.
more heavy processing stuff. And I've seen people do this for more advanced features and a lot of like flashy type of stuff to make things that they wanted to do that were like fancy and pretty and cool, but technically like extremely CPU intensive and not worth
Mhm.
killing the game. Have you seen people do some? I'm curious, like what kinds of things have you seen people do with the job system, or is there anything that stands out like as a common use case that people are using it for?
So yeah, again, it's just kind of like it works best when you're doing it with a bunch of different things. There's a couple of problems that the job system goes to solve. So one of them is like context switching for the CPU cores. So basically, like if your processor is working on one thing and then it needs to work on something else, it has to basically like pause that execution and then start executing something else. And then, when that's kind of like in a state that that it's, kind of completed or whatever, then it can pause that, go back to the other thing, and then, continue working on that. So that's one of the problems that it solves, is that the CPU cores don't need to be switching back and forth between things, which ends up being slower than if it were to just be continually working on one thing forever. So that's one thing that it basically eliminates, is like you can offload certain things to other threads that don't necessarily need to talk to the main thread. So then basically the main thread doesn't have to do as much context switching. And so the other threads can basically kind of take care of that work. And then, obviously and then if you have like a bunch of threads, you can do a bunch of those things in parallel.
One of the things you talked about a minute ago was the navigation. That's something you could probably push off to jobs relatively easily, right? Because that's the entities just really need to know about the navigation area or whatever that data is, and then the other entities.
So
I assume navigate with that. Is that
yeah?
Go ahead.
So there are some parts that you can jobify, some parts that you can't. Because the thing with jobifying things, like when things are being processed on different threads, they can't necessarily like talk to each other, and you can't basically guarantee the result until you've guaranteed that process is finished yet. So that's where you start getting into like talking about job dependencies, where like if you need to access some certain data that is being manipulated within a job, you need to basically have that job as a dependency to ensure that job has been completed before you view the result of that. And so when it comes to things like pathfinding, there are certain things that you can jobify where you're just, calculating individual things for independent cells. But when you get to the point where you start looking at like neighboring cells and basically when you like calculate your whole flow field, you can't jobify that, because you have to like look at the results of other thread or the results of other cells. And then maybe if the pathfinding system finds a better path, then it has to like go back and then, change stuff. So that all has to be done on the main thread.
Interesting. Okay. I'm curious how that all comes together. I wonder how much of it, like with the built-in stuff, is already getting pushed over or planned to get kind of pushed over to some job system. I haven't actually looked into it. It's been a while since I dove into some of the latest navigation stuff. So kind of curious what they end up doing there with that, if they tie it together or anything.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, like I said, I know a lot of people have used jobs primarily for things that were, again, just to look cool, but occasionally for stuff where they just thought like, hey, this is actually like a calculation that's going on constantly and it's relatively slow, and we offload it. Most of the time it wasn't a huge performance increase, but a little bit of an increase.
Right.
And then I know some other people who swear by the job system and love it, but I'm not sure the details on all of the things that they're doing with it. So I have a hard time speaking to exactly what it is that they love about it.
You do need to be careful to not just like go crazy with it and just like all of a sudden start jobifying everything. Because if you're like scheduling a job, it takes a little bit longer than to just run something on the main thread. So you kind of need to like weigh the performance benefits, is like, when are you at the point where offloading this job to one or multiple other threads is actually going to give you a performance benefit, rather than just running something on the main thread. Because scheduling a job does take a little bit longer than just running it on the main thread.
Yeah, I totally agree. You got to make sure that like when you make these decisions to use something like this, that you actually have a use for it and a need. Like the marble guy, that is freaking perfect, right? Like this
Totally.
kind of thing. There have been games like that for me in the past where I wanted to build them, but the scale just wasn't possible with Unity. I couldn't do it because it was going to fall apart. Right now, I don't want to build those games anymore, so it's kind of sad. Like man, if this was like 10 years ago, like there's so many games, so many ideas I had where I just had like millions of things going on, and now like none of those sound nearly as exciting to me. But I can think of a lot. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm going to shut up and just take this next question real quick. Do game designers have to know how to code? I'm curious what your thoughts were on this one. I've answered this a couple times, but I was curious.
Yeah, so I mean, game designers, they have to know how to code. I mean, they have to know how to code. I mean, they have to know how to code. I mean, they have to know how to code. I mean, they have to know how to code. I mean, they have to know how to code. I mean, they have to know how to code. I mean, they have to know how to code. I mean, they have to know how to code. I mean, they have to know how to code. I mean, they have to know how to code. I mean, they have to know how to code. I mean, they have to know how to code. I mean, they have to know how to code. I mean, they have to know how to code. I mean, they have to know how to code. I mean, they have to know how to code. I mean, they have to know how to code. I mean, they have to know how to code. I mean, they have to know how to code. I mean, they have to know how to code. I mean, they have to know how to code. I mean, they have to know how to code. I mean, they have to know how to code. I mean, they have to know how to code. I me
You think game designers need to know how to code if they want to be a game designer?
I'd say in general, no. But I think there are reasons why it might be good to at least like understand the logical process of maybe not necessarily code, but just kind of like how games work kind of under the hood. Just to kind of have like the understanding of that side of things. And if you are working on a smaller team, maybe it's probably going to be more beneficial to have a little bit better understanding of code that way, because you're probably going to be working like directly with, your one programmer on the team or whatever. So it would be good to kind of have like the understanding of programming and maybe some of the problems that he would run into, or she. And I mean, I think that's probably the most part is like, it's good to have like a good, just like an understanding of it. If you're maybe working on a larger team, maybe it's not as important. But I still think it would be good to just kind of be aware of how, logical problems are solved in games.
Yeah, I think that was perfect. And I think when you're on a larger team, like I said, it's not as important, but it will help kind of set you aside. If you can communicate with the programmers better, if you can understand things, if they can say things and you kind of know what it is, or you can see the code, or especially if you can see like the scripts, because a lot of the time with bigger teams, the way that it's going to work is your programmers are going to be writing in C#, C++, something like that, and building stuff out. And then designers might be writing little scripts that are kind of pulling together different systems and hooking things up. Sometimes it's in languages like Lua, sometimes it's in C# or C++. And a lot of times it's in like custom stuff or like designer editor tools. But I'd say at least like 50% of the time, there's some little bit of scripting that's done by designers. And the better you are at that, the better you understand it, the better it just helps. It also helps you get into the jobs. Like if you go in there and you're like, I'm a designer, I can code a little bit. I'm just like, hey, I'm not a good programmer, but I can kind of read the code, understand things, and get through it. It makes a big difference because they think like, okay, like it shows, I think, initiative and just shows that you're going to be able to understand what's on when you're trying to debug things yourself, and probably need a little bit less hand holding. So I recommend that you learn how to code, but I recommend everybody learn how to code. For a designer, I recommend just like learn the basics, like go through, understand how to do
or even do like some visual scripting stuff, like maybe just dabble with some game maker. That's kind of what I mean by like kind of learning more the logical side. Like you don't necessarily need to like be all concerned about learning the syntax and like, just your code's not working because you forget a semicolon or something like that. But I think, just kind of going through the process of like figuring out how games kind of work under the hood, just through like something like visual scripting or some simple game engines like Game Maker or whatever. I think that's probably a good place to at least start.
Yeah, I definitely start with something simple and then just build up. And then the other thing I want to mention on just game designers in general, like if you want to be a game designer, you want to work on Unity games or Unreal, you do need to know your way around the engine. You can't just sit around, write game design docs and expect that everybody else is going to implement things for you. Most of game design work is implementation. Very little of it is sitting around coming up with ideas and sharing those ideas. A lot of it, most of the time, you're spending putting those ideas in, trying to figure out why the hell they didn't work, and then fixing them, and then going back and fixing the other things that you thought were working and weren't working. It's that kind of stuff. You're not just sitting around thinking. You need to know your way around. You need to know how to hook up prefabs, how to modify a prefab, how to not break things, how to use basic source control, and not get lost. So these things are all really important for a game designer. Now, don't get me wrong. There are some game designers who never do any of that. They don't do that. They don't have to. They have a whole team around them a lot of the time, or somebody else that's doing all that stuff for them. Most people don't. Most designers on the team do not have that. Teams don't have any designers that have that. Most teams have all the designers doing their own work, except for as they get up, you become a lead and you start delegating some of the stuff, just like you do with programming or whatever else. Right. But you still need to know your way around and know how to do all the stuff. So make sure that you're not just thinking like, oh, I don't need to know how to use Unity. I don't need to understand how to add a component or any of that stuff. Yeah. I just need to come up with cool game designs and write stories. There are jobs,
especially if you want to be like a level designer or something like that. You're probably going to be in the editor a lot. You want to learn all the different hotkeys and shortcuts, and interacting with your internal tool set and all that. So
yeah, you're definitely going to be using it in every company. Like you're going to be using some editor tool. It may not be Unity, depending on the company. It might be an Unreal editor, or it could be a custom editor. But everybody's got something.
yeah,
Everybody has
and there's a lot of
set. You gotta learn how to-
similarities across all the different programs. Like that's kind of one of the things that I learned in college as I was learning about game development, stuff like that. Is obviously the instructors there can't teach you everything about every program, so they need to basically kind of like teach you to learn how to learn, and like what are the things that you need to look for in every program, that are going to be kind of like your common operations that you're going to be doing and everything.
Yeah. So there was a question about dots. I'm going to jump off of designers for a second. Sorry, designers. As somebody moving from finding the fun prototyping to making an actual game, so they've kind of like figured out what they want to do. They want to make their game. Is it worth prototyping and learning DOTS/ECS? I feel like this takes me away from my main goal. Now, I'll give my opinion. I'll let you answer afterwards.
Okay. Yeah. Let's hear it.
So I would say probably not, unless the game, like the game that you have, is something that you can't get to without DOTS and ECS. If the performance, if you're going to be pushing the performance boundaries for your target platform and your target device with the normal setup, and it's going to be hard, and you're going to have to be hacking stuff and kind of like doing all kinds of random stuff to make it possible, then maybe consider going to DOTS and ECS. Like if you're going to have to fake all kinds of stuff to make it work, or you're like, I don't even know how I'm going to deal with these 10,000 spaceships flying around or whatever, consider it. But if it's something where you're just kind of, it sounds like you're just starting out making a first game, and it's probably not at that scale. There's no mention here of like, I need this giant scale or I need some insane performance. I would say probably not. I would make the game first and then wait until you get to the point where you need it, or it becomes like the standard. What do you think?
Yeah.
Though? I'm curious.
I'd totally like agree with what you said there. I think the only reason, especially right now, to use DOTS and ECS is if it solves an actual problem that you have right now. And not if it's like, oh, that'd be super cool if there was like a live spaceship battle going on in the background that I could, interact with. That's kind of like, like a little bit extra, kind of stretching it a little more, like looking for some cool features that you could use for the tech. So
trying to find a problem for the tech, right?
Exactly.
You gotta find a problem for it.
Yeah. So I think, definitely as of right now, because DOTS is still in like the experimental preview phases and all that, definitely I'd say probably stay away from it for now, if you don't have that problem. Just with games in general, I think for me, like gameplay is the most important part. So if you're, finding the fun, like you're saying, in just regular Unity programming, that's probably the way to do it. And then maybe in the next couple years or whatever, when DOTS and ECS has a full release, maybe we can kind of have this conversation again about which way you should go.
Yep, that's kind of my thought too. I think in a few years it may just become like the default, right? That might just change, and this advice would be completely different. So if you're watching this in, I don't know, 2025 and it's changed, let us know. Just drop a comment down below in 2025.
Drop a comment down below after you like the video, of course.
Well, everybody already hit like. I already forgot to tell them. Yeah, I don't think I told anybody. It's okay. I'm sure everybody remembered.
Indeed. we got good viewers, so
yeah, they're all hitting the like button. Let's see. There were a couple more questions to go through. So, can design patterns used on non-ECS structures be applied as well when using ECS, like state patterns, singletons, and observer pattern? This is an interesting question because it's. I mean, I want the answer, your answer, I guess, instead of mine.
Can design patterns used on non-ECS structure? Okay. So like basically just standard design. Can you use standard design patterns in ECS?
Yes, that's kind of the question.
Okay. Yeah. So, yes, you can. And there are some things that are like built in actually to Unity's ECS. So singletons is a good example of them. So there is like a function called like get singleton or get singleton entity, where basically if so I guess I can talk a little bit about like worlds, kind of the way ECS is structured. So basically, you have these things that are known as worlds, and then within a world, basically, entities and associated data components live in there as well as systems. And then you could have another world that has its own set of entities, components, and systems that can't talk to each other between the worlds, basically. So like those
There's
systems,
separation.
yeah. So the systems only operate on the data and entity components in the same world, and you can have multiple of these worlds. And so you can use like the singleton pattern to basically find, if you have an entity, a single entity in your world with one data component, and no other entity has that, you can use the like get singleton or set singleton methods to basically like find that single data component, and then you could reference it or set any data on it or whatever. So that is one example. And then there are other things you can do, like maybe like the flyweight pattern, where you have basically just kind of like a single like shared component that everything kind of references as well. So there are some things like that. Yeah.
So you can, but I guess the implementation is different, right? So just like if you were switching to Java or something, you would implement it slightly different, or JavaScript or something. And here for ECS, you're still using C#, but you have to implement it slightly different.
Yeah. So you can't like copy
and
paste the code, if that's what you're saying.
Yeah. So you still use the same patterns, just a slightly different implementation.
Correct.
Right. And it sounds like a lot of them are just kind of built into and expected.
Yeah.
That's a good question. Let's see. There's another one. How do software engineers structure out Unity games? Do you use Cucumber or UML, or is there another way of setting user requirements and stuff? So this is definitely coming from somebody doing enterprise-y web stuff. I assume Cucumber UML reminds me of my enterprise-y web days. So this is this isn't definitely not just DOTS and ECS. Like that is definitely one way that you could structure it out and build it, not necessarily planning it though.
Yeah.
For planning out and structuring games, they're always done differently. I've never seen like anything very common. I've seen it vary from I should say it's been different every place I've ever been. This planning process for how we're going to build stuff and how we're going to engineer it and all, it's totally different. But when it comes to actually structuring the software, I'm curious what your experience has been, and then I kind of want to share mine, because mine has also been like all over the place. I've seen everything everywhere, all kinds of different opinions on how things should be built. So you have any thoughts on this, just in general, on how to structure Unity games, engineering wise or software wise? Not so much the planning stuff, but just like the building.
Like in general, like
Yeah, just in general. I mean, ECS is one way, right? That's just like generally like kind of a way to structure a Unity game, and it's a relatively opinionated way to do it, right? There's not, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's is there a lot of variation in the way that people build and structure their ECS projects, or are they relatively similar?
That's a good question. I haven't dived into a whole like wide variety of a bunch of other people's code. But yeah, I think there are kind of like some different decisions that you could make where maybe you can have data components that have a lot of different data on a single component, or you can have like many separate data components. I know Unity kind of recommends having many data components with as few values as possible. And then that way you can basically have a lot of these components shared between many different entities. And so that's kind of one thing that you could probably figure out in like a planning stage as well. just kind of like figuring out what data components every entity will need, and then figuring out how you can basically use like as few of them as possible so you can like share them across many entities.
And the reason to keep them small was so you could shove a whole bunch of them into the cache, right? Like the smaller the components are, the more you can put into that CPU
yeah. So
cache.
all the data components basically fit inside like a chunk, and then I believe a chunk is like 16 kilobytes or something like that. And then so that's just basically like one block of memory.
Okay, so imagine you got like a health component that's got just a single int on it. You fit a lot more of those than a component that's got like a health, a strength, a stamina, a mana, and a string on it and some other crap, right? Like suddenly, like that data strength. Okay, so for ECS, I mean, there's probably some other variations that I don't know about, and we don't know, but it sounds like in general it's relatively similar. People build entities, component systems, and then vary on the details of the implementation. For general like Unity stuff though, that's outside of DOTS and outside of ECS, I have seen an insane variety of stuff.
Yeah, totally.
When people ask like, "What's the normal?" I'm just like, there's no. I've given up on thinking that there was a normal. I've seen people
depends on the project,
who
depends on the developer.
Yeah, exactly. Like some developers love certain things. They love dependency injection systems, and everything they build is using some DI framework, injecting everything in, and that's the way that they build their games. Other people who literally just like hack together everything. I know some people who build their games where almost the entire game is in a single class, in a single file. I don't recommend it. I think it's a terrible, terrible idea, but they do it and they do it successfully, and they're able to complete it, and it's just like their workflow. Again, not what I would recommend. A more successful workflow would be having a game that's engineered with small components that can interact relatively well and be interchangeable. Now, it's not like a giant architectural level statement, but I mean, it's kind of like an overall thing is keep the components that you're building small and somewhat interchangeable, but not too damn generic that they're interchangeable anywhere. If you have a component that you can just slap into anything to do anything, it probably really just does nothing.
Yeah, we're like, this is my int component, and all ints are come from this component. You're like, you're gonna have some problems.
Yeah, exactly. If your component just I've seen some bad ones, but in general, small components with systems that manage them and keep track of their data. Try not to let objects keep track of their own state and their own data too much. Especially when you have large collections of them. Don't try to like go through and iterate through it. I don't want to dive into a whole bunch of random examples, but in general, it varies dramatically on how things are structured. I have personal preferences on how I like to structure my stuff, and everybody else seems to be very, 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 very different all over the place. So, let's see, what else do we have here for questions? I think there are probably a couple more down below. Just scroll on down. I don't know if you had any questions that were popping up in your chat, by the way, that you wanted to just bring up, talk, or anything else. Somebody said, "There we go."
Yeah, let's see. So,
nice haircut. I got a nice burned head too, though. The top of my head is like bright red and super sore. Driving around with the top off in the sun. Didn't think about it at all after getting a haircut. It's been so long since I didn't have hair that I didn't have to worry about getting a sunburn. Now I'm just like, my head hurts. What's the painting of the green midget behind me? That is Yoga, and that's baby Yoga, Grogu.
Baby Yoga,
the little one and the big one. And then if we switch to this view, you can't see right above the Mandalorian's helmet. There's another baby Yoda, a little
nice.
Baby Yoda. It's like my Star Wars wall. And like when I go out looking for stuff and finding things for my office, I get drawn towards random Star Wars crap, and then I just had a whole bunch of it and made a wall out of it. It's fun stuff. And then I got a Marvel wall over there. And a Star Wars wall, Marvel wall, and a video game wall, and my Mario wall. Just started theming them up to make my wife happy. Make it more cohesive, I guess. Just a bunch of random
cool. You got
stuff
your own little sections. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, it was just all my random cool stuff that I like. That's pretty much what I turned my office into. Is like I like a thing, I just put it in my office, just like the room full of stuff that I like. That's pretty much it. Anything that I don't like goes out, and anything that I do like comes in.
Nice. Get the
Yep.
little rotation going.
Yeah, well, I got to sit in here like 12 hours a day, so
Yeah.
yeah,
Might as
I
well
got
make
to
it
make it a fun
pleasant
and
to look at.
a happy place to make it. It's very green on the other side, lots of little fake trees because I cannot keep a real tree. I had one real tree. Oh, you can you can't see it now because the camera angle. I have one living plant. Well, it was living. It's brown and it started hanging down towards little random bottles of potion water, which are just waters water with food coloring. And everything else, yeah, that's the only thing that was living. Everything else is fake because fake stuff lives. Fake tree, right? There
No effort. Yeah.
That thing still as green as the day I got it. Same with that little
Nice
NASA
how that works. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's been hidden. There we go.
Let's see.
Lots of little fake plants.
That's cool.
And they don't attract bugs.
Yes, that is a benefit.
All right, so what else we got? Let's see. Off topic. How do you get chat from screen to show up on your stream? Using Restream. So using restream.io, and then in here on the right hand side, I can see your chats. And I can click on them, and it just pops up with your name and the question right there. So it's pretty freaking cool. It's one of my favorite things.
And we're doing the simultaneous broadcast to my channel as well. So it's kind of cool. You can output to multiple streams.
Yeah, this thing is awesome. And for people joining, I just send them a link and just hop right in. So anybody that was in before could just hop into the stream anytime and it just pop them on. Takes 2 seconds. It's a really cool tool. Definitely like it. It used to just do like the split streaming, but now it does like the whole different modes, different views. So I can switch it up like this and like that and that and all the different ones. And it has the interesting little effects and the little logo that doesn't show up very well here. All right, let's see. What's something temporary you've done at the start of a project that caused you lots of grief later?
Ooh.
I'm trying to think of like specific examples, but this happens all the time where people a lot of the time it was something that was temporary or throwaway that I was planning on throwing away, and then people misunderstood and thought it was real. That happened a lot when I started out. So when I started developing, I would build like little mock-up tools, little mock-up web pages of just an idea, like, hey, would it be cool if we did something kind of like this? And I would show it to the wrong people. I would show it to the producers, the managers, the other people. And they would instantly suddenly this was a tool that we had, and this was a thing that was being shared around, and like, oh crap. And like the code was terrible. None of it worked. Like it barely worked at all. And suddenly like I had just added on like a giant task of go redo this thing and make it something else. But I've seen lots of other things that weren't just like the biggest ones that I can think of. And these ones, not necessarily stuff that I coded, like network system hacks that we'd put in. So one of the things was in Vanguard, there was a small temporary system, right? A small temporary thing in there to do some extra logging to debug what was going on. Put into the network layer, figure out what was happening. Didn't get removed until, I don't know, 8 years after the game was there. It was like a huge performance increase because every network from what I understand, like all the network messages were being just logged out and written for no reason, right? Just to do some extra logging and debug something. And there was a comment in the code saying, debug logging stuff, remove this before release. But when you do that, nobody ever removes it because everybody's like, I don't know if I can remove this. If I remove this, am I breaking the game? Because
exactly. You don't want to like break something right before release.
Yeah, exactly. When you put it in with just the comment, it's really scary. Like people are not willing to go in there and just delete the thing. Like maybe that's changed. Like maybe that comment doesn't apply anymore. One of the reasons I hate comments. Like I would way rather have had that been like a flag. Like this is a setting. It's off by default, and there's a flag that just turned it on. And hey, enable debugging, enable network debugging, right? And it just checks that flag. If enable network debugging is on, it runs. Otherwise, it doesn't. then it wouldn't have been an issue, right? It would have just disappeared, not been a problem. You mentioned maybe they should use a preprocessor directive, probably, but my guess is that this was meant to like, it needed to go out in a live environment really and test it like outside of the debug stuff, and they were just like, we're just going to push it out there, we're going to remove it right afterwards once we figure it out, and then they just never removed it because somebody got distracted or somebody left the team or who knows what happened. And I've seen that happen so many times. So my big recommendation there is like, don't commit that kind of stuff. Like if it's something that's bad, try not to commit it. And if you do have to commit it, put it in there underneath some sort of a flag or an option that's off so that you're turning it on to temporarily test that kind of stuff. There's probably lots of situations with like temporary like starting code stuff that you put in early and just kept building on top of, but I don't know. I don't know if you have any other examples you can think of right now.
Yeah, I was just kind of thinking probably like hard coding things. Like if you're like hard coding values and stuff like that, it's easy to get up and running at the beginning, but then if you want to start, adding a little bit more variability and complexity to those things that you're hard coding, then it can kind of be a little bit of a mess to untie sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. It always gets that way. I think.
Yeah.
You start hard coding and numbers and variables and stuff, it gets to be a mess quick. You got to make that stuff configurable. And I think that's it's going into just having some settings and stuff when you're doing some of those things, I think is important.
Yeah.
I want to jump on to some more questions because I can think of some more examples, but none that I think I should share. Let's see. So what does ECS bring to the table that conventional object-oriented programming does not? Can you give some examples? The primary thing is performance. It's just performance. You're getting the ability to access more objects at a dramatically faster rate. You just have to change the way that you're thinking about the code, reading the code. You can do some, I think, crazy things that normally you would have to fake before, and you might not have just been able to do. Like you might, a lot of time with large scale simulations of stuff, you just have to fake stuff. You would fake the simulation of the stuff, and now you can do that real. Now, whether or not that matters for your game depends on a lot on whether or not the fake simulation is good enough and noticeable when you switch to a real simulation. But yeah, it's performance, right? Well, performance, and when I say that, it's not just like you can push the bounds of stuff. The things that you're doing now can also run at a much lower cost, right? You could run, if you recoded the game that wasn't built for ECS into ECS and did it right and really optimized it, you could probably cut the performance characteristics down in half or way below half so that you could run on a device with half the min spec or even lower. So you do get some benefits there if you're essentially pushing the bounds of hardware. But ECS gives you, right? The ability
you get performance on the high end. Obviously, if you have like a really crazy, insane PC, you can put all kinds of things going on, all kinds of threads. But it also is performance at the low end. So you can, have like a good, smooth running experience that's doing more complexity than, normally would be possible on like something like a mobile phone, without it draining your battery and overheating and everything like that. And then, I think the other thing that ECS brings to the table is also just the whole like structure of it, which is just like kind of a nice thing to have. Kind of like I mentioned, you can really easily just swap components in and out on entities to sort of change the behavior of how they interact in the game. So that's really nice to have. It's just, you can just pull things off, add things on, and then, your systems filter out by components. So like anything with some certain set of components that you define will be affected by that system. And then, so it doesn't matter necessarily if it's, like a car or, an animal or something like that. If, it has the set of components that you're filtering out against, then it's going to run that system on them. So that's kind of one cool thing is you can just swap components in and out and it'll be affected by different systems. So it's just kind of like a different way to think about code. And yeah,
I think a lot of people really enjoy the coding in that way too, and they find it easier. Personally, I've done so much object-oriented programming now that it feels a little bit weird to me, but I can totally understand the concept and the idea of it being easier, because there's not a lot to think about. You have these data objects, you have these systems, they have the interactions, and there's not much more to it. The code's a little bit hard to read and a little bit confusing, but the actual interactions, like if you think them through and you just write them down on paper, they're relatively simple, and it makes it a lot easier to explain those interactions without all of these methods and references everywhere. I find it kind of interesting in that way too, I guess.
Yeah.
And somebody mentioned my mic cutting in and out. I don't know if this fixes it. I just disabled the gate option completely. So let me know if it sounds better. I've been having some weird issues with this. I was actually going to change to a different type of mic so I don't have to have something in my face soon. But we'll see. And maybe this will just fix it and I can get back far away. The problem I have is like I want to be able to get way back here and still talk.
Gotcha.
And have it not attenuate so much. So I want to get like a nice shotgun mic setup or something. I don't know. To figure that out. Somebody loves the Yoda paintings. Thank you. I love the Yoda stuff too. Again, I wish you could see the rest of the Yoda and the little Star Wars posters there and stuff. But we'll have to get to that later sometime. And then there was a question about, do you sacrifice anything to use ECS? From their understanding, doing more complex processes like dispatching events that chain more events is a lot more work. So what do you think? Is there, I mean, there's obviously going to be some trade-off there, but would you call it a sacrifice? Or what are the costs? Or what do you lose when you jump to ECS? I guess that's a really good question.
Yeah.
What can you not do anymore?
Well,
so aside from your code changing, what disappears?
Yeah, so you'll lose, obviously like kind of the like hierarchy of object-oriented programming. So you can't necessarily really have like child and parent objects. So that's one thing that goes away. Also, there's just kind of like a little bit more complexity with like some of the variables that you have to use. So if you want to like multi-thread certain like structural operations, like adding and removing components, you have to use like an entity command buffer. And so that's like, that ends up becoming like a little bit verbose about how you have to like define them and use them. So I think there's like kind of like some extra complexity there. And then, yeah, I mean, the other major thing is just kind of the whole, it's a shift away from object-oriented programming. So you don't have the same things that
what
you would
about
in that.
the built-in systems? You'd mentioned that they were working on a custom animator, right? Because you can't just use the mechanism system with it, right? For example, you can't just hook up a mechanism animator to an entity. You have a different process for animating them, right?
So you can still use that stuff. You have to use like basically what's called a managed component. So typical data components are defined as structs. But a managed data component is defined as a class. And then on there, you can actually include, so on a regular data component in ECS, you can only have blittable data types. So just kind of like, basic data types like bools, ints, floats, things like that. So you can't have like strings or game objects or animators or, a lot of the common Unity component types. But on a managed
the primitives, right?
Correct. Yeah. But then on a managed data component, you can have, references to game objects, animators, things like that. So you can kind of do it in like a little bit of a hybrid fashion where you can have one data component, like traditional ECS data component that maybe goes through some like crazy complex process of calculating what the next animation state is going to be or something like that. And then you can use the managed data component and then just set the animator to whatever you need it to be.
Okay, so you can just use that managed component to kind of wrap and hook in your entities with the standard Unity mono behavior type systems, right? The ones that interact with mono behaviors and components.
Yeah. So
That's
the
really
idea
cool.
is to separate out so you have kind of like the traditional data component with the blittable data types that you can take advantage of ECS, the burst compiler, doing those kind of like maybe some complex calculations to figure out, your next animation state or whatever. And then in a separate system that is basically just running on the main thread, all you're doing is just taking that value that you calculated and then just setting it on the whatever traditional Unity component that you want to access.
Okay, that makes it a lot easier. And in fact, I don't think that actually existed the last time I played with dots. The managed one. So
Yeah, I don't
that's really cool.
remember when they were added in, but yeah.
Yeah, if they did exist, I didn't know about them. So that's definitely handy. Okay, cool. So it sounds like outside of just big workflow changes, most stuff is supported now in DOTS. What about things like I guess the audio mixer and all that? You could still just do a tie-in, right, and do a little bit
Mhm.
of a hybrid setup there, right?
Yeah,
So if you want to
yeah.
play, what if you just want to play audio from DOTS? Is there a way to just do that? Then you just play it from is there like a custom DOTS way to do that or ECS way to do that?
I do think they have some audio components kind of in the works, but that isn't something that I've really experimented with.
Okay, I was just kind of curious to see kind of where that's at. It sounds like with that component though, you can kind of get into just about anything. So
Yeah,
that
yeah,
seems
yeah.
really handy and helpful. That's a nice one to know about. Let's see if there were any other questions. Let's see. Oh, my mic is still having
Wah,
problems. I don't know
wah.
what's going on there. I have to
You sound
figure
fine
that
to
stuff
me.
out.
So.
Oh, okay. It could also be the fan that's going right on my face, keeping me from overheating, causing some issues. Um, what else we got here for questions? I don't know if there's anything else. Let's see. State machines work with ECS. How would you build a state machine in ECS? Is that something you've done before? They say you wanted.
So not really. That's something that I do plan on making a video on soon. But I think kind of like the opposite of what you were saying a little bit ago. So in ECS, as far as I understand, at least, again, I still kind of need to do some experimentation with this. Is that the data components basically are the things that hold the state. You don't want the systems to hold the state because again, the systems are completely separate than the data components. So normally, your systems shouldn't really have any local variables. The only time it makes sense is if you have like a singleton and you basically just like it's called the onCreate function is basically the same as like the awake function. In there, you might get a reference to a singleton, and then you can just store that in a local variable on that system so that in your update function, you can just reference that easily. But yeah, again, so all the data is basically stored in the data components. So, on your data component, you would have, there are multiple ways you can do it kind of depending on your needs. So one way that, you might think if you just come from traditional programming to use is if you just have like a data component with an enum on it. And then, that enum is set and read in some sort of system, and then based off of whatever that value is, that certain part of that system will run, and then do some extra operations or whatever. And then another way to do it is just by using tags. So basically, instead of having one data component that like keeps track of the state it's in, you can add or remove these tag components to entities. And then if something has this tag component, then, a certain system is going to apply to that entity. So the tags thing is super interesting because it's kind of like the preferred way of like filtering out entities. So you can basically just say, anything that has this tag, run this system on. And it actually is not really that performance intensive to add or remove tags to entities. The reason for that is because when you add a tag to a single entity or a group of entities, all that needs to happen is it basically just changes it takes the entity and then it just basically points or like, so you have the chunk of data components, and then you say, these data components are associated with this specific archetype that has, these components on it. And then you can just change that reference to say, oh, now this chunk is associated with this archetype now. So there's no like data actually there's no data actually being moved. So all the data is in the same place in memory, but then you just say, it's now associated with this archetype.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I have to play with that some. That tag system sounds definitely interesting. I don't think I vaguely remember hearing about it, but I don't remember diving into it at all. So it sounds kind of fun.
I put out a video on my channel recently kind of going into tags. So I think that's a good kind of overview of how they work and how to use them in ECS.
Nice. Yeah, and everybody should go make sure you subscribe to his channel so you can check out the state machine thing afterwards. If you're curious to see what that's like, which I am, I'll see the video when it pops up, and I assume everybody else will if you got your little alert button on. Let's see. Are there any other questions in here? I wanted to jump over to the tips pretty soon because I had some. I had a good one. But let me see if there were other questions in here. Okay, I'm scared to program stuff related to threads. Any recommendations to prepare or relearn before diving into ECS? Just remember that you can't just pass data directly across the thread, or you can't just directly access the data across the thread without causing some issues in Unity. With ECS, you got your own ways to do it. But the other thing is to just watch out for like thread locks and thread contention. It's something that if you're new to threads and you're new to just writing threaded code, watch out for things that are what you can end up with, and what happens to everybody at least the first couple times they're writing threaded code. Less so with ECS probably, but definitely with regular stuff. I'll give Johnny a second to pop back in.
I'm just changing the battery on my camera.
Oh, okay. You'll write code where one thread is waiting, it's running through, and then it's waiting for a variable to get set on some other thread. And then the other thread is running through, and it's waiting for this first thread. And then they get locked kind of waiting for each other. This happens with all kinds of different situations. I've seen it happen in games a billion different times, but outside of games as well. So watch out for that. And also remember that the coroutine system is not using threads, and you can do majority of what you want to do probably with delays and waiting and stuff without actually switching over to a new thread just by using coroutines intelligently. If your system will work with coroutines and you don't need to jump over to multi-threading, then I would recommend sticking with that. But obviously, as you hit performance problems and you need to start offloading work, then you need to jump into some actual threading stuff. But I wouldn't, again, dive into it until you run into the actual need. It's just one of those things where like you'll learn it, you'll solve a problem that you don't have and overcomplicate your code until you it's going to make it a headache, and it's going to kind of sour you to it. So wait until you actually have a problem to solve with the stuff before you start trying to implement it in your code. Doesn't mean don't learn it. I shouldn't say you still learn it in advance, so you know about it, understand that it's there, and that there's a solution there for when you run into the problem, and so that you can recognize that the problem is there. Like if you have a performance problem that you can thread and you can offload it, you want to know that that's a possibility and recognize it, not think like, because there's some performance problems that you can't do that with. So you kind of want to know what the options are there and understand it, but I wouldn't put it into your code until you're solving a problem.
Yeah. And I think with the C# job system, there are, it basically does a lot of the kind of scary threading stuff for you behind the scenes. So you don't need to worry about, a lot of the things like race conditions or, defining which work is going on which thread. Like that's basically all handled for you by the C# job system. But yeah, again, the only thing you do need to keep in mind is if you have any functions or something like that depends on the result of a job, you just need to make sure that you're setting those dependencies. So there's just kind of like a couple little quirks that you need to figure out. But once you kind of figure that out and start being able to think in that kind of multi-threaded way, then not really too difficult.
Yeah, there's a lot of chat in here too about just when to use ECS and when not to. So it's kind of interesting. So one of the questions too was that it seems that the biggest thing that it does is solve the RAM access problem by bringing the stuff into the CPU cache. And they're saying if/when the speed to RAM access catches up with cache access, does an ECS become obsolete? So as kind of an
if RAM speed catches up to cache speed, then the CPU manufacturers are doing something wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's first like not a very likely thing to happen. But the truth is, like, the speeds are fast. They're so fast that a lot of the stuff for ECS that's why we're able to code games needing to use this setup now, because a lot of stuff it really just isn't necessary for. As things scale up, it's probably going to become kind of the same, but the requirements and the things that people want to push the boundaries to are going to scale up as well. So it's like the things that we would have needed an ECS system to do 20 years ago, we can easily do on a shitty old phone, using simple object-oriented programming. But the things, that people want to push the boundaries to, they're still going to, I think, be using systems like ECS or something similar as hardware scales up and gets faster. I think the biggest thing that's going to make them converge is going to be when they're able to start pulling in a lot of the performance benefits at compile time. So they're able to take a lot of the stuff that the OO stuff is doing, the current setup is doing, and convert that and transform it into acting more like ECS so that it's not getting the cache misses and stuff all the time. I think that if that's possible, that will really kind of, that's the kind of thing that would obsolete ECS, because suddenly like you wouldn't get any performance increase no matter which way you did it. It'd just be whichever way is easier, it is the way you do it. But yeah, I don't think hardware is necessarily going to.
Yeah, and I guess I was also kind of thinking of the whole like Apple Silicon thing, where basically they have kind of the system on a chip where the RAM is on the same silicon as the CPU. So, I mean, yeah, it'd be interesting to see, if there's still like a percentage performance benefit of using ECS. So that'd be interesting to experiment with.
It would be. I mean, I assume you're still going to have benefits from just having it all sequential at the very least.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Too. It's an interesting one to think about, and one I'd be honest, I don't know enough of the technical details to give a real good answer to. But it's fun to talk about and think about. I don't know. Do you know anything about dots animation and Chematica?
Yeah, I mean, dots animation is definitely kind of a weak spot for me. I mean, there's not really, like, it's in the very early stages of development. And I haven't looked at it too closely, but from what I've heard, there's pretty much no documentation on it yet. And yeah, it's just maybe not in the best working state from what I've heard right now. So that's something that I know a lot of people are interested in. And I get it seems like every video I get like a bunch of comments from people, asking for some dots animation stuff. So it's something that I definitely, have intentions to look into, but it's something that is still kind of far off, unfortunately.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. Last time I did it, like, I was doing sprite animation because that was all that was there. So it sounds like it's come quite a bit, but I hate the lack of documentation is always a pain in the ass. So there were a couple more. Let's see, moving objects and syncing them and through ECS. Would there be? So this question was like, what do you think about moving and syncing ECS trigger physics with game objects? How would you pass a hit to the game object back? Is that performant? I'm going to guess that unless you're doing a lot of other stuff in there, this would just be a performance cost, right? You wouldn't get anything from it. But am I wrong? Is there some benefit here to doing the physics in there and then passing it over?
So basically saying doing the physics on the ECS side and then passing the results to a game object.
Yeah, and then into a mono behavior, I guess, to deal with like to basically re-implement on trigger enter, it sounds like. Or on collision, but it seems like that would just be slower because I would assume that their default implementation is the fastest one that they've got. But I don't know.
Yeah. No, I think it'd be interesting to experiment with. I haven't I don't know if I've done things in that way where you have like ECS physics go back to game objects. I know I've kind of done some like position syncing stuff where maybe you have like the entity in the ECS world interacting with physics and all that, and then you have like kind of a game object act as like the renderer, and it's just like basically syncing position with it.
Yeah, that's the most I've done. So that's interesting. Okay. Well, here, let's, if you're ready for it, I'm ready for it. Jump on to tips. So
Cool.
we've been doing this weekly tip of the week, and I've got one ready. So I'm just excited about it. Normally, like Jason Story's here, and he's got a bunch of them, and I've got like nothing or a terrible one. This time I got one. It was something that I came across that I was really excited about earlier this week, and I used it, and I was kind of using it for inspiration and just wanted to share it. It was something that I thought applied to pretty much every game developer out there that has to do any game development stuff, and was really, really simple. So I'm going to share screen and pop it up. And it was this GameUIdatabase.com. So it's just a list of, or a list that's clickable through, of a bunch of different game UIs with all of their settings menus, all of their different UI screens. So you can click through and see
extremely ususeful.
Yeah, you can see like exactly how the UI was set up for every element of it, and think through like all of the pieces that you need and the things you need. The really cool part about it was that it has them like categorized by game type. So you can go like,
oh wow,
I want to go pick a genre. I want to do like, let's look at card games, and just look at different card game UIs. They only have, I think, a couple thousand, but I mean, it's still a ridiculous amount. Going through, I think it's like 7,000 or something on here. And then you just go through and look at the different UIs and get all kinds of inspiration and ideas, and also like thoughts about like how to solve different problems that you might have with UI. How do I make it? What should that be? So I thought this one was really neat. If you guys like it, drop a comment in the description down, or drop a comment down below and let me know. So I'll share more things like this, because I thought this was really neat, but I don't know if everybody else does.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think kind of the UI user experience is something that kind of be difficult for people. Because when you're creating your game, you think of like kind of the options that you need, and you kind of just like put them wherever seems convenient to you. But it's not necessarily like following any kind of like standard practice where someone might expect something to be. So I think just being able to like yeah. So yeah, I think just being able to like reference, obviously thousands of other games to just kind of see where they place things, what happens when you click something, like that's just like all really important things to keep in mind.
Yeah. So yeah, if you guys like this stuff, let me know. But I thought it was really neat, and I just wanted to share it. So yeah, did you have one you wanted to share, Johnny? Again, I didn't give you much warning about this, so don't have one. It's all good. But if you got something,
I got a couple quick like kind of keyboard shortcut ones. This is like one that I just like kind of came across randomly. It's like super simple, but it ends up being pretty useful. So if you like create something in Unity by mistake, like you like say right click create, and you end up creating like a capsule instead of a plane or something, or you just wanted to create an empty game object, but you created some component or whatever. Or it even works in the folder view, where if you like right click and you created the wrong thing. Basically when it's kind of in that state where it's just like set to rename the object, if you just hit escape, it'll delete the object. So like if you create the wrong thing, you can just say, oh, I didn't want to do that. You can just hit escape, and then it just deletes that mistakenly created thing.
What?
Yeah.
I did not realize that. Let me try that.
I use that all the time now. If I click on the wrong thing, like I just like kind of did it by instinct one time. I was like, oh dang it, I did the wrong thing. I hit escape and then it just disappeared. I'm like, oh, that is awesome.
That is cool. I just did it. I did not know that happened. I thought it would just leave the name. That's interesting. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's very handy. Yeah. I do that a lot, where I hit it and I'm like, oh, delete. Go back in and delete it. And then if I'm using Collaborate, it does a bunch of file updates and stuff.
Yeah. So that's a good one. And then just kind of like some like typing shortcuts that I've been using a lot, especially like when programming. And these are just kind of like standard Windows things. I don't know if there's like a Mac equivalent, but I've been using these all the time recently. So if you hold down the control key and then you use the arrow key, like if you're in like a text editor or something like that, you can skip like back and forth by word instead of just going like letter by letter. But you can also do the same thing with the backspace and delete keys. So if you hold down backspace, it'll delete one word at a time. Or if you do delete, it'll delete like the word ahead.
Wait, so you hold control and hit backspace.
Yeah. So if you just like open up Notepad or something like that.
All right. Learned a new hotkey. That's freaking awesome. I did not realize. So it just deletes the one before you or the one after your cursor, the single word.
Exactly. Yeah. So I've been using that all the time. You know, you mess up a word and you don't want to like hit backspace like 1,000 times, especially if you're like typing out some super long ECS class or something like that. You can just do control backspace. It just deletes the word and then you can start.
My habit was like control shift arrow key to select the whole thing and then hit delete. And like 4 extra key presses I can skip here.
Yeah, or I'll just like, you know, sometimes if I'm, you know, writing out a sentence in an email and I don't like how that's coming out, I just, you know, hold control, hit backspace like 3 times or whatever, and then, you know, it's done.
That is nice.
Yeah.
I love it. Control shift arrow. Yeah. Let's see. Which one is that? Control shift arrow. Oh, yeah, that's the select. That's right. To do group selection stuff. Oh, man. Yeah, hotkeys is super handy. Like it's weird because as a programmer, everybody tells you like typing speed doesn't really matter, and I think that that's kind of true. Like being a fast typer does not make you a good programmer, but hotkeys make a huge difference.
Mm-hmm.
Like as dumb as it is, like being able to type at a reasonable speed, you know, even like 30-40 words a minute, I'd say is probably an important thing to do. Like you don't need to be super fast, but you need to at least be able to get your thoughts onto the computer without having to forget what you were doing by the time you finish typing it, right? But getting the keyboard shortcuts, it saves you so much time and it makes things so much easier. It gets rid of like, I guess, all of the extra wasted time in there when you forget what you're doing because you're trying to figure out how to change something or how to move something around. So it's interesting. I don't know. I always thought it was interesting that people thought that like typing and programming were the same too. That like typing fast meant you would be a good programmer. Like, no, totally unrelated. Like they're loosely affiliated skills, and that's it.
Yeah,
like you need one for the other, but yeah, it is not.
Typing is the interface. Oh, I'll give a tip to if you do want to improve your typing speed. Let me. I'm actually going to grab my camera and show off something here.
Oh, what do we got?
Let's see if this will work.
This is going to be a pro tip, I'm sure. I'm guessing this is going to be something crazy.
So this is my keyboard here.
Okay.
Blank keycaps.
Oh, nice. Can you get in a little bit closer?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Now you can totally see it. Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, that like really forces yourself to learn. Like, I mean, I know every single key on the keyboard by heart. Like every weird like symbol and like everything that you're going to like, you know, have to enter as a programmer or whatever. And so, yeah, it just forces you to learn where every key is without, you know, obviously looking at it, because if you look at it, you know, that's not gonna do you any good.
Yeah, exactly. When I learned to type, it was back in the olden days when we had typing class at school. So I think it was like 7th grade, and we had a typing class, and they made us use a freaking typewriter. I mean, it was old at the time, right? Like at the time, I was like, "What the hell is this? Why are we using a typewriter?" Like, I got a nice computer and keyboard and stuff at home.
Yeah.
Like, what are we? But yeah, we're still using like this old beat up typewriters. And I learned how to type in 7th grade, and then in 8th grade, and then in 9th grade, because I kept switching schools and I kept just retaking the class because it was easy. I was like, I did it once and it was terrible and I hated it. But by the end of it, I could type like 40, 50 words a minute. So when I switched schools and took keyboarding again, I was like, oh, look at this. I'm a pro at this. And I just kind of like chug along through all the stuff, and I just slowly started getting better and better and took it. Yeah. There's a couple of easy A's in junior high school. But I definitely recommend people learn it and play some of the games too. Like a lot of the typing games.
Yeah, they are helpful.
Or make one. Like I've seen a lot of people just make a typing game as like a practice project. If you want to learn how to make a game, make one that will teach you how to type. Make one that goes over the letters. It's
Yeah, there you
relatively
go.
easy to do.
Kill
You,
two
you
birds with
create
one
a letter,
stone.
spawn it. Yeah, you spawn a letter, move it up, and then make sure that you hit the key when it's in the right area or something.
No,
You
I
can
think
make
that
all
actually
kinds
is a fun exercise for people to go through. Like, that's just a good, simple project idea where you can have like an end goal in mind, something to work towards. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's useful because you can use it to learn how to code. I remember one of the VR hackathons that I went to. The winning game was a VR typing thing. So it was interesting because you can't see your keyboard, right? You got a headset on, so you cannot see the keyboard. Your hands are there. You got them set, and you're good. And then you got to like aim at things and press the key or type the word while you're looking at the thing up in the air. So it was impossible to cheat, right? And it was definitely really neat, and it won, justifiably so. It's a pretty cool thing. So I think that's a fun one. Maybe I should do a video on that, how to make like a typing game. Maybe make a DOTS version of it.
Yeah, right.
3 billion letters. You gotta type them out really fast. Everybody's got to type at the same time. I don't know, but yeah, it'd be an interesting one, I think, for sure.
Yeah.
Did you have any more tips you wanted to go over? I kind of cut you off in the middle of your keyboard shortcuts.
I got maybe like some kind of tools that I use frequently, just like, again, like I kind of use them just for like general things. So like I have a screenshot tool and a clipboard tool that I use. So
yeah, share them.
Yeah, so the screenshot tool, we were talking about this beforehand, but it's called GreenShot. And then, so yeah, it's just like a super simple tool. You just hit the print screen key on your keyboard, and then, you can just like kind of drag out a window or whatever. And then after that, it'll kind of give you some options of what you want to do. So you can like open up the screenshot in an image editor. And then the image editor just like has some just like cool basic things, like you like blur out a section, or you can, point some arrows, or you can like sequentially number things. It's like when I'm providing instructions to people for my IT job, like I can just like take a screenshot of it and say, click here, click here, click here. And so, yeah, that's just like a good one for screenshots. And, obviously you're going to take a lot of screenshots for game development. So it's good to have a good screenshot tool.
And working with designers and stuff too, like thinking,
yeah,
is not just like for posting your screenshots online, but when you're working and you want to share stuff with those people, that you want to show a designer like, hey, this thing is wrong right here. Having those tools, like you said, where you can do an arrow and stuff and mark a spot is really handy because you send it right over. Or like when you're testing things, like the number one thing from testers is these screenshot tools, because they want to be able to mark it, send you exactly what the problem is, and do that. In fact, I think when we talked earlier, I mentioned that I used a slightly different one. I used the Snagit one. Which same kind of thing. I think GreenShot's probably just a much better deal. I got mine on a bundle, but mine was also recommended by a friend of mine who does testing. That's what he does. He loves it. Okay. GreenShot I think is what I would go with too, because it's free. But the other one, like I said, I got it in a bundle, so it was already part of my stuff, and it's definitely an important thing to have, a screenshot tool and something there.
And you can easily just like with GreenShot, you can easily just like share to different applications. So yeah, it's a good one.
So, I mean, you had one other one you want to share, right?
Yes. So my clipboard tool is called Clip Diary. And so basically the way it works is if you just like, copy something with Control C, or just, if you copy like an image to your clipboard or whatever, it basically creates like a history of everything that you copied. So then you can just use like some shortcuts. So I have a Control Shift arrow up, arrow down, and then I can just go through my history of the last things that I copied. So like if there's something that like I, copy pasted and then I copy paste something else, but then I want to go back to the other thing, I can just do, Control Shift up arrow and basically go through like my history of recently copied things. And then and then when I let go of the Control Shift, it just puts that thing on my clipboard, so then I can paste that again.
Interesting. Have you tried the Windows V key? Hit Windows and paste. Hit Windows and V instead of Control and V to paste. Because they've added on clipboard history into Windows too. I think it's very similar to the functionality of the third-party things.
Okay.
I think they've stolen that functionality,
Yeah.
copied it, and put it right into the OS. Because you can copy things and have the history of all of them in there, and have it kind of pop up and be a context-aware pop-up, from what I understand. I don't use it very often, but on occasion I accidentally hit it, and I'm like, oh yeah, there's multiple pop-up things there.
Okay. Let's see.
I don't know how that compares exactly, but like I said, I never remember to use
similar.
it.
Yeah,
but it seems handy either way, using one of those. So just having a list of stuff. Because what I normally do is I just have the tabs up, and I'm like back and forth, copy paste, copy paste, copy paste, trying to figure it out. So
yeah,
getting used to that might be a good thing to do. Oh yeah, somebody mentioned in chat too that you can do it with Windows V now too. Interesting.
Oh, cool.
And the snipping tool, Windows Shift S, that's what I used to use all the time too, before using the screenshot tool. And I think a lot of people also don't know, if you hit print screen on your system, at least in Windows, it just copies your screen to the clipboard. You hit it copies your screen to the clipboard, your full screen by default, unless you have another tool installed. And then you can just paste that into any image editing tool, which I used to use a lot too before actually it was before I found GreenShot. Before I found GreenShot, I used it all the time. And then Jordan, one of the QA guys that I used to work with, showed me a GreenShot. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. And then eventually switched, but only because it was free. Nice. Oh, and apparently Alt Windows R starts recording the screen. I would try hitting it, but I'm afraid that I'm going to end up crashing everything if I hit it. Like I hit Alt Windows R and it does something video related, and like the screen crashes, system reboots, and everything else.
Yeah,
interesting. It's cool. I have lots of handy ones. I mean, for me, the best ones though: Control Delete and Control Backspace. You've saved me a shitload of time now.
I love that.
I'm going to use those nonstop. I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah.
Somebody's asking if there are any tools for making a Windows animated GIF. What did I use for that? I don't remember. I used some little cheap tool that I downloaded.
Screen to GIF?
Camtasia. Yeah, I use Screen to GIF. That's it.
Yeah.
And now I use
Screen to GIF. It's I really like it. Yeah.
Also, the guy from the Game UI site dropped by. I popped his message up there, but I didn't want to interrupt you. Ed popped in and said, thanks for
cool.
Hey, thanks for making it. Dude. Like,
nice.
Yeah, you made
that's awesome.
Site and made it a super handy tool for everybody. So
that's super cool.
Thanks there, everybody. Tell Ed thanks in chat and go check out his site. Like I said, I think it's super handy. I've been using it a lot lately, just going through trying to figure out UI stuff. See, any other things in there? I don't see anything else in there for these questions. Anyway, I don't know. Was there anything else you wanted to dive into or chat about? Otherwise, I think we just take a couple more questions and start to wrap things up in a little bit.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
I don't know. Does anybody have other, I guess, Unity related questions, GameDev stuff, DOTS stuff?
Yeah, I'm down to talk about whatever.
Yoda questions. We just talk about Star Wars. Lots of Star Wars stuff up there. I got this. I wish I could. I wonder if it'll show up there. This old Star Wars. Oh, you can kind of see it right there in the edge. The poster there, right above the YouTube play button.
Okay.
Yeah, this like old looking Star Wars poster. I was all excited about it because I got it and I was like, "This is neat." It looks like the original movie. Apparently, they like reprinted them in 2020. They like remade them. It took me like 2 years to figure out what it was actually from though, because I got that at a pizza shop for $1. They were trying to clear off all their stuff on the wall, and they had all kinds of cool stuff. So bought like a ton of different things that they were unloading.
Oh, that's cool.
In that one, and yeah, it's been like the one thing that took me forever to figure out what the hell it was. It's like, I don't know where this movie poster came from. I couldn't find any pictures of it. I'm posting on Reddit asking every month, like, anybody know what this is? Somebody asked if you're coming back as a guest on Sundays. I assume Johnny will come back plenty of times. But why not?
Yeah, I'm
assuming he's not busy, I assume he'll be on plenty. Any advice for a QA engineer trying to break into the game industry? For me, I would say get a job doing QA in the game industry. Like if you're already doing QA stuff, there are tons of QA game dev jobs out there. Not all of them, but most of them, if you're actually at a studio and you're not like at a third, I wouldn't try to get one at a third party company that does QA for companies outsourced, because then you're not going to get the same benefits and the same interaction. But if you're at a company where you're, at the actual studio working on QA, even if it's not like a game that you love or something that's super exciting, you're going to be interacting with the developers a lot. And if the team is medium sized, there will be, and especially medium to large size, there will always be opportunities to, well, not always, most of the time be opportunities to jump from one department to another. And I've personally, I jumped from the QA department into development, and almost every developer I know, not more than half of the developers I know started off either doing customer service, QA stuff, tool stuff, or something else. They started off, or as like an intern. They all started off kind of at the bottom and jumped in. A couple
Right.
people, like,
Yeah.
just freaking all stars, and they were already good, or they were building stuff on their own. Like they already knew how to code games beforehand. And they were already doing it. But most of them, they went in through something else, especially like designers and stuff, because it's really hard to prove that knowledge. You got to get in there, talk to people, communicate with the people, and they see that you're competent and capable to start to give you opportunities. I would say get a job, a QA job in the industry first, and learn a little bit about how to make games. Like try making your, if you're a QA person at the company, at a game company like that is using Unity, and you've built your own Unity games, you'll have a really, not, you can have a very easy time making that jump. It'll make it a whole lot easier, and definitely I would say very possible. It's something you should have no problem doing, even without making your own games. Being in the QA department is kind of the way to jump into development, I think, or it's a very easy way to jump into development.
Yeah,
Or,
yeah, I'd completely agree. And yeah, I think having that knowledge of like how games are actually developed is going to be, very helpful for you, and something that can probably, make you stand out a little bit more if you can kind of talk a little bit about the development process. And if you understand that side of things, I think that's, something that people are going to be looking out for.
well,
For that kind of
you
position.
can go to lunch with the people and talk to them about it, right? Like they can be talking
Yeah, yeah,
about
yeah, yeah.
the things that are going on in the game and the engine, and you can understand it and communicate with them. You might not understand it nearly as much as them, but you have a loose understanding of what they're talking about and be able to be
Yeah,
at least a small part of the conversation.
yeah,
And
and
I
then
think
so
while
like
you're there, go ahead.
yeah, so when you're actually like doing the job, then you can kind of know things to like look out for, things that might be going wrong or some bugs or whatever. So, it's good to know that side of how games are actually made.
Yeah, yeah, it helps a ton. It helps you recognize things and know what to look for. But the other thing, and I recorded a video about this. I don't know if let me check if the thumbnail is ready. Maybe I'll premiere it after this. Let me go look. But the video was about socializing at work, and the benefits of it, because it's, oh wait, is it ready? Let me check. We might just premiere it after. Yep, we'll premiere it after this one. So
Sweet.
about the value of it and the benefit, because I mean it is probably the number one thing that you can do to improve your career is talk to other people who do your career and that you work with. Like the best way to get a promotion is be friends with your
Hey,
boss.
look, that's what we're doing right now.
Yeah, literally, like, if you want a promotion, like if you're best friends with your boss, you got a much better chance. If you're friendly with your boss, you got a much better chance. If you
Yeah.
are the person that the boss doesn't like and is in the corner talking crap about the boss all the time, then you're not going to be the one getting that promotion, right? Or the new opportunities, or the jump out of QA into development. If you're sitting around never talking to anybody, ignoring everybody, and hiding and stuff, which is the default. It was the default for me, and I think most people that are into this kind of stuff. But you won't. It'll make it a lot harder to get ahead. I'll put it that way. Lots of problems, and like I said, I did a whole video about it that I'm going to download and release. Let's see. I don't know which thumbnail we should use. Let's screen share. You guys can pick number 1, 2, or 3. I'll pull it up right here in just a second. Let's go over here. I'll just let everybody
say real quick. Someone in my chat says, and the real key is for your boss's boss to know you.
That is the best. Yes, if you're friends with your boss's boss, that you are set. So here you go. We got design 1, 2, or 3. They're out of order. So if anybody's got a preference, I don't know. What do you think? I was leaning towards design 3. we're doing a little bit of behind the scenes YouTube stuff now.
Yeah.
Design 3 seemed like the biggest and brightest orange with some tall text.
Yeah, I was going to say that one as well. I think just the text is the best.
I like the weird spikes on the hair there, though. But okay, we're leaning towards 3. Anybody got okay? Looks like 3 got another vote there. So we'll download 3 and we'll use that one as the thumbnail for the video.
Boom.
Perfect. All right. But yeah, just talking to people. Like, if you want to be that engineer, get the QA job there, and then go to lunch with everybody. Go talk to them when they go out to lunch. Go hang out. Don't just be nice. Be calm. Be cool. Talk about game-related stuff, work stuff, and don't badmouth people while you're there. And I should hit approve delivery. Otherwise, I'm gonna have that little Fiverr logo over it. That was an interesting disaster once, or story at least. I'll tell you about it in a second. But anyway, yeah, go out to lunch with people, talk to them, and all that stuff, and watch the video if you're curious. I'll talk a lot more about it in detail, about some of the benefits and some of the other things you get from it too. Because it's not just like getting ahead at work. There's quite a bit more that you can kind of gain from socializing at work and socializing with people, and outside of work too, because there's a lot of opportunity to socialize. Like right here, even the people in chat, some of them are just talking among each other, and then at meetups and user groups and stuff. I'm going to shut up. Anyway, yes, there's a great tip. Don't appear too needy, annoying, or arrogant. That can also backfire. Yes, if you go out to lunch with people, emulate and just kind of blend in with everybody. Don't try to stand out. Don't try to be like amazing and show off constantly. Definitely don't go around making shit up. I've met people who do that too, that like make up random stories, and the whole time you're like, well, I don't know why they did that. Now I just can't believe a word that they say. Now I got to verify everything they say. Like, just be chill, be calm, match the energy and tone.
Add to the conversation, when you have something valuable to say. And yeah, I mean, I guess, like you were saying, don't be too needy or whatever. So just, don't be the person always asking for advice. You want to kind of, definitely don't be afraid to ask for it.
Hey, I want to be a developer. Hey, how can I be a developer? Hey, do you think I could be a developer now?
Ask for advice.
This is good enough? Am I good enough yet? Be friendly and chat and talk and communicate like a person. Because eventually, in a good scenario, you're going to become friends with a lot of these people, like the people that you work with. Like, if your job is good and your environment's good, you're going to become friends with them, and you want to just start that early. Like, make sure that you can be friendly and have a good time. And I know it's not like that at all jobs, but collaborative jobs like game development, where you're working with designers and kind of building this thing together, I think it happens a lot more. It's not like more of like a retail type thing, or a scenario where you're dealing with different people that are coming in and out all the time. You've got like this team that's working together on a single mission for quite a while, and you kind of come together on it. And in the scenarios where everything is right, it gets to be a pretty tight environment. Let's see. What else do we have? What is the learning curve? Is it harder than regular mono B? Oh, okay. For dots and stuff. Yeah, it's harder, right?
Yeah.
I think we've kind of hit that. So go back through, talked a lot about just how much harder,
especially as of now. Dots. Yeah.
And then, so be a normal human being and socialize, right? Yeah, essentially. But that's not as easy as it sounds, because when you're, like nerdy and quiet and introverted, like most of us, like, I mean, I know it seems weird, like I just blab on YouTube all the time, but when you go out in public, like I can't talk to people. I just get fucking nervous and stressed, and like I don't like talking to people on the phone. Random number calls, like I'm just like, I don't know. I still have like the high school version of me that's terrified to talk in front of anybody ever. But when it's in front of a camera and all I can see is you, it's easy. I can see my face and I can see you, and we're just chatting about game dev stuff. But anything else, like even like at a job, like I struggle with that. Like going out to lunch with people, like I'm like, okay, where are you guys going? Can I come? I guess.
No, I'd say it's definitely definitely not natural for myself either, but I've kind of been like trying to force myself into these situations to just make it a little bit easier for me, and so that's definitely been helpful.
Yeah, this is exactly what I did. I had to force myself. Actually, Jeremy Clark gave a talk at a user group. I keep saying his name because as long as I'm not too old to forget it, he's the one that kind of encouraged me to get up there and talk. But he's up there talking, is like I was terrified to do this. It was the scariest thing ever. And then I did it, and it wasn't as bad as I thought. So you can do it too. And I was like, I'll try it, I guess. I was like, fine, I'll try. And then I did it, and I was like, oh, he's right. Like it's not as terrible. And I think a lot of it is like you start your public speaking, at least a lot of us do in school, like in high school or junior high, which is not the most friendly environment and not the most welcoming environment for most people. Like so sometimes it might be a great environment and like your speech is going to get a great round of applause no matter what. But for a lot of us, especially probably a lot of people, it's people that are into game development and stuff. Like you get up there and just be nervous as shit and be terrified to talk because like you're gonna say something dumb and get made fun of or whatever, and it'd be stressful. At a game dev type thing though, when you're working with other developers and people, very rare. There'll be like one or two people in the audience that'll be a dick and like be talking bad about it or whatever under their breath. But overall, like, you're gonna have the other 99% of people just being insanely nice and thankful and just. And hey, you did a great job. Yeah. This was awesome. I learned something. And people in general, like they're just nice about it afterwards, and they're really supportive and stuff. So I found that like public speaking and doing that kind of stuff, terrifying at first. But
yeah, I mean, you have all these like fears and things in your head. This like kind of narrative you build out in your head, but then like you go out and actually do it, and then you end up having like a really positive impact on people. And even that's something that like I've kind of learned with making my videos is like. Especially in like a bunch of my older videos, I was like, pretty nervous in front of the camera, didn't really know what I was going to say. But then, as you start making more videos that are like, informative to people and like you get good positive feedback from people saying, oh, this like, helped me out so much. Or they even like send you a link of a game they made, like using some of your tutorials. You're like, oh my gosh, like this is amazing.
I agree. That's freaking awesome. I love seeing that stuff. Yeah, I talk to my wife every now and then and tell her like, hey, you should make a YouTube channel about working out because she loves work. She works out nonstop. She's nice. All into fitness, but she's very much like everybody else that I tell to make a YouTube channel. Is like, I don't want to have negative comments. I'm like, I don't really get. I don't know. Maybe it's just game development. Maybe it's just like a subset of.
Oh, the game development community is like so amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, the comments are it's almost always something nice. Occasionally somebody's like, yeah, I disagree. I would have done it a different way. Okay.
Yeah. And then even when that happens, like we'll be able to have, even when that happens, like we'll be able to have like a, level-headed conversation about whatever. And then, I think in the end, just, the people who are interacting, like myself and the other person or whatever, we'll learn. And obviously those comments are public, so people can kind of, read through and maybe they'll, be able to kind of make the decision for themselves about what they think.
Yeah. And everybody that's thinking about making a YouTube channel should just do it. I always say that. Like, if you're thinking about it, you should just do it and try it, and it'll be good. It's good. It's a good idea. It'll help you. And one other thing I want to talk about with public speaking before I jump into this comment that I posted. Actually, let's just go over it. So it said, even experienced speakers often take meds to calm their heartbeat to help them with public speaking. So if you're worried about like public speeches, like everybody gets stressed. And I want to just be clear, like, first off, like I still get stressed. Like every time before I hit the button, I'll like sweating and stressed and nervous. I do it before I record a video. I get nervous and stressed out before I hit publish on a video. Pretty much all of it constantly stresses me out. It's just that I've gotten to the point where like after I do it, after I start, I'm like, okay, the stress is gone. It's just done. Like worst case, this is terrible. Like worst case scenario, like this goes terrible and I'll just delete it. Like, that's it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the end of it. Like I don't have to worry about it too much more. Like, but I mean, it's never happened. Like, so I just kind of learned that, the disasters weren't going to be an issue. But I wanted to talk real quick about public speaking stuff and just give everybody a quick tip too, which is about Toastmasters. I don't know if you've seen Toastmasters, been to it or anything.
So my dad did it for a while, so I'm kind of familiar with it, but I have never like been to a Toastmasters meet myself.
I've only been to a little bit, but I still have my 2 ribbons from when I got to go, which was a lot of fun, and quite a few times. And this was the welcome one. So they give you little prizes just for showing up, even right the first time and being brave enough to go there. But it's essentially like a practice thing for public speaking. You go out there and with a bunch of other people, not really a bunch, like 5 to 20 other people, depending on the size of the group, practice public speaking. And it's very structured, organized, and very laid back and relaxed. You'll find that like most of the people there are worse at public speaking than you are, or about the same level. And then there are a couple that are really good, and those really good ones are going to help you get better. So I went for as long as I could until I moved away from this one. And I've been slowly like considering just starting going again, because it's a lot of fun and it's really helpful for getting better at speaking, getting rid of things like pause words, the ums, the ahs, and all that other stuff. Like one of the things you do at that Toastmasters is there's a job to count those. So like at the end of it, you go through and like, oh, Johnny had 46 ums and 12 ahs. like, and like you start to become conscious of it. So like when you know that's happening, like okay, cut back on it, and you like start to get proud. You're like, I got down under 10 this time, and you start to get better and better at it. So it's something I highly recommend for anybody that wants to speak at all in public, or if you just hate public speaking and it's stressful and you hate it, just go do it, because it's going to be, I mean, half the people there, or at least the ones I went to, like they're just extremely nice, chill people. A lot of them are going to be older than me, I would say. At least at maybe it's because the one that I went to is at like a retirement home by the beach. But a lot of people were slightly older than me, but some of them were younger, and some of them were even game developers. It was interesting. Like I went there and I'm like, oh, hey, one of the guys worked on Destiny 2. And it's like, oh yeah, working on Destiny 2 right now. I'm like, oh, cool. We're talking about game dev. Another guy worked on other game stuff. So it was interesting. Like you find people that are into the same kind of thing, and just nervous about talking, and they all just wanted to get better at public speaking. So it's something I highly recommend for everybody if you're into that stuff.
And that's great. It's just like, a positive environment that like, everyone's there kind of for the same purpose of helping out each other, get better at public speaking or whatever.
Yeah, it's handy, and it's the kind of thing that like people do and just don't really mention. Like people that are good at public speaking tend to practice this stuff. Like they don't get good at it magically or automatically. So, and they're more common. Everybody gets stage fright. Definitely the case. I can only imagine. Like my wife was watching the Michael Jackson documentary thing a couple of days ago, and I forget what it was. I was only partially watching because she was watching it. And he had some situation. He was going to do a performance, and then there was like a big fight with his dad or his brother or something out front, and he freaked out. And he was like, I can't do it. I can't do the thing. Like, it's over. It's not going to be good enough now, because he's all stressed out. And like I've had that situation, like not to that degree, obviously, but like where like I just can't record a video today. Oh, like I'm too stressed out now. Like the day is ruined. Like it's done. I mean, if it were an emergency and I had to do it, like, and it was the end of the world, sure. But I guess for him, like, doing a concert, it's not the end of the world. He's like, yeah, I don't have to do it. Like, oh, good. It's not going to be perfect. I don't know. It seemed weird, but I was afterwards. I was like, that's like an extreme version of the little stress attacks that I get. Anyway, I don't know. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about? There's a lot of chat about other interesting channels here. Freya's channel and Charles' channel, definitely good resources. I'm trying to get Charles back on here, but I think he's out on vacation roaming the world. I keep seeing his Instagram posts of like, oh, I'm off here at this vacation spot. I'm over here. I'm over here. I'm over here. So I'm never able to get a hold of him, but hopefully soon we can get him back on here.
Yeah, no, Charles is great.
Yeah, he's a fun guy to talk to. Cool. Yeah, was there anything else you wanted to dive into, or are you ready to just wrap it up?
Looking at my chat
Did
here,
you have any questions on your chat?
Yeah, I just got one that came through. So someone says they're an intermediate Unity developer, but scared to join any game development communities because the amazing skills that others have. How do I overcome this?
Just realize that most people don't have amazing skills, and everybody thinks that they suck as a pro. Oh, everybody who's most people think they suck as a programmer. I have like constant stress and nerves about showing my code to stuff. I'm like, oh yeah, like
totally.
I don't know if this is good enough. Like there's probably a better way for this. There's probably a better thing for this, and like I get it too all the time. I would say just jump in, and the best thing that you can do really is show your code to people and get feedback on it, and don't be afraid of terrible feedback. Don't be afraid of them being like, this is interesting, but I would have done it completely different. Let me explain.
And in fact, you can be like looking for that. Look forward to people picking apart your code a little bit, because again, you're just kind of going into one of these situations where, everyone's there to kind of help each other out. And so just be aware that, the process of that is people are going to talk about the things that you did wrong. And, it's not like a knock against you as a person. It's just kind of like, where you're at right now. And then that's going to help you get to a better spot.
Yeah, it's how you get better at your code. I mean, the best thing I've ever done was show bad code to friends who are like, yeah, I would restructure this entire thing and re-architect it. It would be a lot easier for you to work with, a lot easier to do. And if you can get them to just show you, just like, can you please show me? Just like, kind of, can you run me through it and explain it so I can understand it? And I've had it happen, and my code got better every single time I've done it. I've met somebody who just had some criticism about my code, and I dive into it with them. They have great advice and great tips. Sometimes I'll take all of what they have to recommend. Most of the time I'll take all of what they have to recommend. Sometimes it's just a bit like, okay, I take a little piece. One thing to watch out for is don't necessarily take like all your stuff from one person. Like, don't assume that because one person told you something who's been doing it for a little bit longer than you, that's the best thing to do, because you can have I've given and gotten plenty of bad advice in my life, right, from developers, because they're just not at the level to understand the consequences of the advice that you're recommending. So you got to watch out and just get advice from a couple people, but in general, just take that bad stuff and fix it, right? Or at least take the criticism and address it, and don't get upset about it, because it's easy to just be like, oh yeah, that guy's a dick, like I don't like it, he doesn't like my code, he said my code is crap. Like, maybe your code is crap, and maybe he's trying to give you some people are just terrible at giving advice to and giving feedback, but there's probably something to it. You should probably look into it and see if maybe you can, instead of just being mad at them, show them up, make your code better than theirs. So improve it, figure out what's missing, and then learn a little bit more and make it so that you're suddenly the better programmer and that you're giving them that advice. It's a lot better than sitting around bitching about them. Anyway, were there any other questions you had on your side?
Let's see.
And one pop-up over here about legal ramifications for new developers going through to protect themselves in their games. I would say I don't really know. In general, most of the time when people are worried about legal stuff, they're either the lawyers on the team, or they're like the business people on the team, or they're just not really focused on actually making the game. They have an idea for a game, but they don't have a plan to make the game. The legal stuff is stuff I generally don't worry too much about, because people aren't going to steal your idea or anything, and they're just not. Like, it just it's not a common thing that happens unless your idea is a proven out awesome thing that people love and is making you a ton of money. People aren't going to steal it. People copy and steal Nintendo games. They don't copy and steal this random startup's idea that they posted on a page. It's just it's a concern that everybody has, but nobody actually does.
And even if that is the case, where someone kind of steals your general idea, their implementation of it is probably going to be, wildly different than yours. So like, even if you have, a cool idea for a mechanic or whatever, maybe that is kind of like the core component of it, but, everything around that is going to be, different for your own style or how they make games.
Yeah, they're not going to make the same exact game that you're making. And realistically, like, I've never seen anybody do it where they just like, oh yeah, I'm going to go make this game idea that somebody else had that they've been talking about. I'm just going to copy that exactly. I've seen it for for popular games that are successful and making a lot of money. People do it all the time. But for stuff that's just like somebody's idea, everybody's got so many ideas and so many games they want to build. There isn't a developer out there that is just like struggling for like, oh, I just need an idea to go steal. They all want
ideas are cheap.
Everybody's got a dozen of them at least. Like, every idea that you've got, everybody else has a whole bunch of their own too that they're interested in. So it's not something I worry about too much. When you get to the point where your game's successful, you'll have legal teams that deal with that stuff. And there may be other stuff to it. It's not something that I dive into. I really don't know crap about the law in general, or the law in different states and countries and everywhere else. So something I try not to worry about. Let's see. If I want to work at a big game studio, should I study Unreal or Unity while I work as QA? Whichever one the game studio that you want to work at is using. If they're using Unreal, definitely learn Unreal. If they're using Unity, learn Unity. Whichever one they're using is the one I would recommend.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to like what we were talking about a little earlier about just kind of like learning how to learn. So you're much better off just picking one, learning one or the other, rather than learning neither. Because if you go through the process of learning one, figuring out how to interact with everything in that one, chances are in the other one, if you do get a job using the other one, then there's going to be a lot of similar things between the two engines, and maybe you don't do them the exact same ways, but you kind of know the things to look for. What are the tools and how do you interact with them in the different engine?
Yeah, that's definitely the case. Being able to, if you can work in one engine, you can make that jump to another engine really easily. Same's true with like programming language. If you can code in one language, it's not an instant automatic, like you can code in any language, but you can learn to code in the other languages in like a tenth of the time that you learned that first one. The first one is the hard one. After that, like learning a new game engine or a new programming language or something is dramatically faster. You're still going to take time to build up your skills and get equal level. You're not, in 10% of the time going to get to the same level with Unreal as you are at Unity, but you're going to get past all the beginner stuff and through all of the fundamentals really, really fast and be proficient. Oh yeah, I would definitely recommend you learn a game engine if you want to be a game developer, though. If your goal is being a game developer, you've got to learn how to use some game engines. It's just important to understand like how to make a game, how the games are put together, what the process is like, what the parts are like, how the art kind of goes in with the code and stuff. It's an important thing to know. Even if you just want to be a designer and you don't want to do programming and stuff, you still have to do all that and put the things together. So. Well, I ran out of things. I think there are a couple more questions, but I don't know if there's anything else.
Here's
go ahead.
I got kind of an interesting one in my chat. So, is Unity going to merge with blockchain tech anytime in the future?
I don't understand the question. How would they merge with it?
Yeah, so that's kind of what I was thinking too. Is I don't know if there'll be anything like directly integrating Unity and blockchain, but I can definitely see like some third-party plugins that you could get maybe off the asset store if you wanted to implement some blockchain technology into your games.
Yeah, I'm curious about that. I don't know how you are on the whole blockchain stuff. I'm curious how that's all going to play out long term. I've seen a lot of companies that came up around like using blockchain tech in games. So they want to do like blockchain tech to do item trades and item transfers and stuff.
Right. Yeah.
Like to do, and I guess the only context where it really makes sense to me is like across games, where you go on to go like from one game to another, and you want to have some shared common tech there. Because like doing a single like an item transfer trade or something in blockchain with like a server-based game seems like it's just adding complication. Maybe I'm misunderstanding. There's something else there that I don't know, but it seems like it just makes it a lot more complicated of a process. Like your simple active, just changing ownership of an item by changing a single field in memory, like an ID, an owner ID, is now this whole more complicated thing. And there might be some benefits to it, but it also seems like there's a lot of work around like how you make that work. So I've always kind of struggled to understand what the bonus or benefit was there. I'm kind of curious.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes sense. I think pretty much like the only reason that I could see at least that you might want to have some blockchain thing for, keeping track of items or whatever is if you as a player didn't want to have to put your trust in the developer. That they, are keeping track of your items and basically making the server secure and all that.
Right, but the developer has to put in the system for you to not trust them, right? Like the system that you'd be using in place of it would be the one that the developer put in because you don't trust the developer. So it seems kind of I mean, well, not that they built, but that they still integrated with, right? Just like if they integrated with a database or something. So
I guess
I don't know.
the person
I feel
kind of
like I need
clarifies in my
somebody who's
chat
like a
that
blockchain expert to come talk to me about it.
the person in my chat kind of clarifies that they say basically any apps that revolve around wallets are kind of censored on the asset store. You could monetize any asset in the game, cross-platforming it.
Oh, I don't know about that. It's news to me.
Yeah.
I guess I'm not too into the blockchain stuff in general, though. Like, I got a tiny little bit of crypto that I bought a long time ago, and that's it. I get lost by it. I have some hard drives that I still want to scan to see if I remember when Bitcoin first came out, I got all excited about it. I think I set up to start mining it. I don't think I ever actually got anything out of it, and it wasn't worth anything at the time. So I just kind of like left it and forgot about it. But I've always like got this thought in the back of my head, like, what if there's $1 million on a hard drive somewhere in a closet that I just don't know about? I need to go look. So one day I will look, but until then, I'll just keep the happy thought around that maybe there's $1 billion in the closet. There isn't, but it makes me happy to think about it.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think I have run out of stuff to chat about, and I need to kind of run to the bathroom and do a couple other things anyway. But I also wanted to premiere off this video. So we were talking about the what was socializing stuff at work, and I realized that thumbnail was up, and we already picked one out. So I set it up to be a premiere, and I'll post that in just a second when we finish talking. I don't know, anything else you want to say to everybody before we wrap up, other than everybody should go jump over to your channel and subscribe real quick right now. Make sure that you've done that already, so you'll learn more about DOTS, ECS, and all the other stuff that Johnny's talking about.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Come over, check out the channel. Let me know if there's anything like specific that you'd like to learn about in DOTS. I'd just be kind of interested in what you all, want to see me do with this technology. Also come join us over on Discord. We got a little community going over there. Really trying to build that up with a bunch of ECS developers. That's just like a good place where we can, kind of help each other out in real time and all that. So you can just go to tmg.dev/discord, and that'll get you right to my Discord.
Nice. I'm gonna go join that Discord real quick too.
Sweet.
I don't think I'm in there. I don't use Discord a whole lot just because I get way too many messages. But
nice.
I jump into the channels. I have like thousands of messages, so it's impossible to keep up with them. But the channels are a blast. So jump in there. Okay, I just posted the premiere for 7 minutes from now, so everybody can go jump over there, check it out, and be ready for it. And then I guess we'll be back next week, and maybe Johnny will be back with us.
I think next week I'm going to be out of town. I think I'm going to get my brother's graduation, but maybe the week after.
Sounds good. All right, everybody. Thanks again for coming out and joining us. Thanks for hitting the like button, subscribe, and sharing the video on Facebook. I assume everybody already just went and posted it on Instagram and Facebook and all that stuff. And then I'll see you over in the premiere in just a little bit. Thanks again, everybody. And bye.
Thanks, everyone. Later.
Now I got to go find the button to hit the graphic to make things disappear and wave one more time.